And Karen, I'm testing the stream, and oh, yeah, this is a lot of audio. I like this. So we can even probably turn this down a bit, actually. Yeah, we don't need it that high. I mean, it sounds pretty good. Yeah, it's working, so yeah. So, sorry? Yeah. Yeah, well, we cranked all of the audio up, so. Isn't it? Because I don't have it turned up all the way. But that's tons of audio there, and I bet you Karen's going to say it's... And I bet you, because we turned up the audio output levels of that too, inside the software, that I bet you it's up there too. So now we can stop the stream probably, and I'm going to go check with Karen and see if it sounds good. Oh, that's feedback. That's feedback, Kelsey. So, yeah. But, yeah, that's... I think we turned down that master just a bit less and turned up that amp a little bit more, and that sounded fine the first time. Yeah, but it's not going into the yellow. It doesn't have to go into the yellow. It should go into the yellow. Okay, but the stream is going into the yellow too, right? Hmm? The stream is going into the yellow, though. Oh. Yeah, the stream is going... Hello, Gary speaking. Okay. Hey. Oh, sorry. Well, yeah, we've kind of... Oh, no, the stream is still going, so the speakers are just off right now. So, yeah, does sound very good. Okay. I can pay attention to this. You had to crank the speakers right up. Okay. I got them off. Straight up the screen. It's... That's hitting the streaming on the red when I'm talking like this. I'm at the podium talking into the gooseneck mic. So, yeah. And it's hitting the red on the meter. I mean, when I'm back here, let's point this properly, like that. Okay, there we go. So, yeah, I am talking and it's into the red. Do you have some other volume down, though, besides maybe... inside the software, inside the web page, there's an audio volume? Yeah. Oh, and it cut out. Okay. 1 second. Okay, I'm going to come to that. Okay, 1 second. Okay. pay attention to that. Yeah. Don't pay attention to that. Now let's see. So, yeah, let's go as high as, let's just crank it for now.
Yeah.
So we're not using the speakers right now. And let's just see how that sounds. Okay, Karen? Karen, gonna do another test, okay? Let's see how this sounds. Okay. All right. So, you're not going to hear my voice to the speakers, but she can hear me on the stream. I know, so I'm just talking to nobody. But, sorry? I know. So, well, and I'm letting Conrad know that, hey, there's no speaker audio because we don't have them turned on right now. So, and it's going into the yellow roughly around that, right? So, I mean, if I'm standing properly at the podium, I should be going into that yellow, no problem. Like I was seeing last time. Okay, you pretend to be a counselor, just don't bang the gavel. Please don't do that. She sent a feedback loop like you wouldn't believe through this place when she hit that gavel last time. Oh my God. I told her not to, and then she did it. She looked at me and went, oh, I'm so sorry. So, hello, Ted, Counselor Pryor, sorry. So, yeah, and the audio sounds awesome. So, yeah, let me go back and see how Karen's, if she had to turn it down any, okay? Why don't you talk for a little bit, Conrad? You talk anywhere. Sit at a table. I just talked them all down.
Sure. Well, I can read to you our agenda. Welcome to the Squamish Nation Traditional Territory. Adoption of agenda. Staff recommendation that council adopt the January 9, 2018 special business meeting agenda. Bylaws. First two readings. District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200 2011 amendment bylaw secondary suite amendments number 2582-2018. Staff recommendation. District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200 2011 blah 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 amendment bylaw blah 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 blah. Given first and second reading. And that the District of Squamish zoning bylaw, blah, 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 hearing be scheduled for January 23rd, 2018 at 6 p.m. How's that?
One, two, 1, 2. Okay.
That's Terry giggling there. Okay.
Why don't we?
So you don't have the speakers on, do you? So Doesn't sound like it. I don't even think I can hear the amp actually.
Mr. Sims,
Mr. Sims, ooh, that's very official.
so if I need to make some photocopies,
Yes, there's a photocopier behind the front desk.
yes, is
Yep.
it going to do anything?
Nope. Nope. The only place that you would need a code would be the Adventure Center. Every other copier we have has no code on it or anything. Yep. Especially if you're making a photocopy, it's not a big deal. So, yeah. Yeah, so there you go. Now I can hear the speakers.
Okay, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Oh, yeah. Like, that's loud.
Yeah, but I'm trying to get these two balanced.
Well, this one's pretty balanced. I mean, I can hear myself.
But balanced with each other.
Oh, balance with each other. Okay, well, I'll let you balance it then if you're going to test, and I'm going to go back and see how that works now. So, because we switched computers.
1, 2.
It's a livable, it's a really livable place. Oh, yeah. Well, down in South. It's a beautiful, it's a walkable city. It's structured for, yeah, I like that. Yeah, but there's nothing wrong with it. Except
So if I run, they can hear. I can still hear myself on the phone when after I'm talking for a bit because there is a bit of delay still. So let's see if this makes any difference. And you want me to try the PCM? Yeah. All right. So if I'm sitting here, oh sorry. If I'm sitting here, can you see the levels? Can
It's pretty good balance. You can
Can-
fill it with it, you know, as...
Can you hear me out the speakers and everything? Like that's good?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay, so let me go back, run back there and see if I can catch them before my voice stops traveling. Okay.
Testing, testing, Gary. This is just my regular speaking voice. Just hoping you can pick this up pretty good. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing.
Hey, Doug. Happy New Year.
I was getting out of it for some reason, and then I didn't copy you on what I was.
Oh, I think it was the RCD on the ocean front.
I got my old thing jumping all over everybody. Oh no, I know this. It's just one of my standard runners. That is something to me. There has to be have breaks after speed.
Oh, yeah.
But it didn't. What I did is I sent a letter to the editor.
Do you know where the button is for the screen?
Report.
No. That's the next thing that we have to work on.
Sat there for about an hour.
Well, we, it's a little bit of one of those situations that, to be honest, we don't give him any tips because they haven't done anything. Jack is the dad, John's the son.
Yep, Terry's gonna turn the, oh yeah.
So Mike's no longer any part of this. He's been bought. But John Jackman, who's on Smackers, and his son John has been here for 6 years. And now he's heading up the chief guy anyway, he took half the staff. The staff that's taking all that stuff at the university and stuff and wastewater and stuff and all that.
I still don't know what happened.
I have my suspicions.
I think that's pretty much what it was.
That's very
The last version I saw is but I think it's at the point where no, it just presents it to the public. I saw that.
So, and the only thing anybody's ever said, oh my gosh, I never seen the reason why I've done this for you before.
I've got it. I know the map. I know the map. Yeah.
Oh, story.
To be honest, and I said this to you before, I don't have to figure out what an appropriate FAR or FAR or whatever you want to call it is. And then that probably was
There we go. Got it.
Let all these bombs go forward.
Perfect.
That's not right.
That's gonna be the long one. What would be beautiful? Well, I think that's good that you're talking about the Jack because it's the entrance to the water.
The staff said, okay, what the staff are gonna do is we're gonna run it.
It could be. I haven't talked about it.
So that's the,
I literally passed out the staff all over it, so
Okay, Conrad, testing. I'm gonna see how this sounds. Testing.
Good to see you. He's hanging in. He's not okay, but he's hanging in. He's alive. No, he turned it off. evening, everyone. Welcome to the special business meeting of the District of Squamish for Tuesday, January 9th. Halton Squalum, please Palakmat, Klas Squamish, Oeomeo. Welcome to the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. I'd like council to consider an amended agenda with the inclusion in 4.2 of ratification of decision at committee this afternoon with regard to the MOU and the Rural Dividend Fund. So if council is amenable, I'll look for a motion to adopt the amended agenda. Moved by Councillor Pryor, seconded by Councillor Kent. All those in favor, opposed, motion carries. First up, we have the first two readings of Bylaw of District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2011 amendment bylaw, secondary suites amendment number 2582. Mr. Elias.
Mayor and Council. My name is Brian Daly, Development and Subdivision Coordinator, and this is Jesse Fletcher, Planner with the Community Planning Department. We are here tonight to present Council with the secondary suite zoning bylaw amendment in order to correct a procedural error in the E-Bus zoning bylaw update. This proposed bylaw is presented for consideration of first and second readings. The proposed public hearing date for the secondary suite amendment is January 23rd, 2018. District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200-2011, amendment bylaw number 2566-2017 was adopted by Council on December 19th, 2017. The bylaw, however, failed to follow two procedural requirements. The amendments at third reading regarding the regulation of short-term rentals were a substantial change in use and require a new public hearing. And the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure authorized the bylaw without the changes made at third reading.
So as a refresher, Council directed staff to explore further options to increase the supply of rental housing. The secondary suite amendments seek to address the limited supply of ground-oriented rental housing in existing residential neighborhoods. To do this, the proposed amendments will introduce the term accessory dwelling units to differentiate between secondary suites and detached suites, including the requirements that they each have to follow. Allow both an accessory dwelling unit and a secondary suite on the same lot as a single-family home, and introduce a greater variety of housing forms such as multi-unit flex units to increase rental housing options. The amendments also define short-term rental and stipulate that short-term rentals are not permitted in secondary suites, multi-unit flex units, or accessory dwelling units, and also defines cooking facilities to help with enforcement of unpermitted suites.
Staff have implemented a consult level on the IAP2 participation spectrum for this project. Staff introduced issues and proposed solutions to the community and solicited feedback. Feedback received to date has and will continue to be considered and used to adjust recommendations. A project page was created and has been featured on the District of Squamish website since July 28, 2017. The page is supported by District of Squamish social media assets. 2 pop-up community engagement events were hosted in August. Staff recommend the Council approve the following resolutions. That the District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200-2011 amendment bylaw secondary suite amendments number 2582-2018 be given first and second reading. And that the District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200-2011 amendment bylaw secondary suite amendments number 2582-2018 public hearing be scheduled for January 23rd, 2018 at 6 p.m. Staff alternatively recommends that the District of Squamish give first reading to District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200-2011 secondary suite amendments number 2582-2018, or that Council refers secondary suite bylaw amendments back to staff. Thank you. Questions?
Thank you. Council, do you have any questions for staff at this point? Seeing none, would someone like to move first and second reading and the public hearing date of January 23rd in council chambers? Moved by Councillor Reyes, seconded by Councillor Kent. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So that we'll have a public hearing on that bylaw on January 23rd at 6 p.m. in council chambers. Thanks. Next up, first 3 readings of the District of Squamish Hotel Room Additional Tax Levy Bylaw number 2580-2017.
Mayor Heinzman. My name is Christine Matthews. I'm the Chief Financial Officer. The report before you is requesting that Council pass or provide 3 readings on a bylaw this evening that would request that the province increase the provincial sales tax for hotel accommodations from 2 to 3%. Just for clarification, this report sounds like it's coming from staff, but actually it's a direct request from Tourism Squamish, and staff is facilitating the report through to this process. Ms. Weeks, Leslie Weeks, is unable to attend this evening, but if council has any additional questions, then we would certainly bring her back prior to 4th reading and adoption. The Tourism Squamish has gone through some public process regarding this and has determined that the actual, timeframes of this, 64% of properties representing 81% of the rooms are in favor of this change. Of information for council, there are 43 municipalities in the province participating in the hotel tax program at a 2% level and another 14 at a 3% level. Of note though, none of our neighboring municipalities are currently at 3%. Although I did get the impression from Ms. Weeks that others are looking at it. So unless there's any additional questions, there is a 5-year plan attached to the report that outlines what they expect to use the revenue for. It is probable that this could take anywhere from 3 to 9 months after it passes through the cabinet, and there's quite a process that goes with that. We have put in the bylaw start date of May 1st, but there's transitional rules, so it would start when it gets through cabinet. In discussions with the destination British Columbia, Ms. Weeks has indicated that they suggested May 1st be on our bylaw for that, as being the earliest opportunity to change to 3%. They anticipate that this would add about $125,000 worth of additional revenue. And on page 29 of your agenda outlines their revenue sources currently for Tourism Squamish. And other than that, unless there's any further questions, I'll do my best to answer them. And
Councillor Squamish?
Thanks. So we have the ability to enact the bylaw for finances for increasing the hotel tax, but we have no ability to direct the taxation. Is that correct? The tax goes directly to Tourism Squamish, and no percentage of that can be taken out of for trail maintenance or for helping the municipality with the extra strain that it puts on the community, inviting tourism to town.
The actual purpose under the Provincial Sales Tax Act is to facilitate tourism marketing and branding of that nature. So no, I don't believe we'd be able to use it for another purpose. We also have an agreement with Tourism Squamish that we would flow all of the 100% of the hotel tax through from us. So we receive it from the province, but we flow it 100% through to Tourism Squamish.
So just as an understanding, that agreement is between the municipality and Tourism Squamish. It's not it's not a provincial mandate that all hotel tax goes.
For clarification, both. The provincial sales tax and the use of that additional 2 or 3% as the municipality determines. That is an optional program, but if the municipality decides to use it, then they expect that those revenue sources will be used for marketing and tourism. We have chosen to enact that or ensure we comply with that by flowing the funds through to Tourism Squamish, who runs obviously our visitor center and our tourism programs for the area.
Thanks very much.
I think the difference is that some municipalities don't have an entity like Tourism Squamish, and so the function may be under the municipal umbrella, but it's fundamentally a provincial tax and legislated through the Provincial
Sales Tax Act.
Any other questions, Council? I don't see any. I think Councillor Chappelle's point is interesting because, and I just feel like I need to make this point sometimes, the province is spending a ton of money promoting tourism in the province and not following it through with enough money on the infrastructure side. So they bring people here and then don't have the facilities, whether it's toilets or park facilities or whatever it is. So I think that's the point Councillor Chappelle is trying to make, is that they need to back it up with the infrastructure dollars to support the visitors that they're helping to promote through these types of taxes. Look for a motion to approve first 2 readings, moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Pryor. Any additional comments or questions? Don't see any. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion carries. It's always hard when the straight thing did. So if I don't see you, councillors, please gesticulate a little bit more.
And Mayor Hines, just for clarification, the motion was also to provide permission for the application to be submitted?
It was
correct?
the entire recommended motion.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have the consideration of District of Squamish Official Community Plan Bylaw number 2100-2009 Amendment Bylaw Garibaldi Springs number 2478, as well as the zoning bylaw, the associated zoning bylaw.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Jonas Valnishkas, the Director of Community Planning, and with me today is Susan Stratus, the contractor planner that's working on this file on behalf of the district, and Dave Nero, Director of Major Projects working for the district. I'll pass it on to Susan to make the presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll just jump into the presentation for the proposed Garibaldi Springs development. Our purpose tonight is to look at the revisions that have been made to the Garibaldi Springs development application and to introduce the OCP and zoning amendment bylaws for first reading. The property that we're looking at, the legal address is 2100 Newport Ridge Drive, just over 48 hectares of land, and it is the previous golf course site, Garibaldi Springs Golf Course, located east of Tantalus Road and bounded by Dowd Drive to the north and Newport Ridge Drive to the south. The adjacent uses are the hotel, commercial and townhouse uses on Tantalus Road, as well as single-family development to the north and to the south. The background on this project, the application came forward to the Community Development Committee in June of 2016. That was prior to the formal application being submitted, and the applicants were looking for early direction from council. In June and July of 2016, the applicants held some early public information meetings, and in July of 2016, the OCP amendment application was submitted. That was followed in November by the rezoning application being submitted. In 2017, the formal procedures started, and I would say between November and May was primarily a period of staff review. There was a lot of technical documents that needed to be reviewed, and we did bring forward an update on the project to the May 23rd Committee of the Whole meeting. In July, the Committee of the Whole again received a report. They had requested information on the previous development history, and the applicants brought forward some revised plans in July. In September of this year and October, the applicants held two pop-up public events, and in October and December, the applicants went to the advisory design panel. So just looking at the technical reports, the environmental assessment in the form of a detailed site bioinventory was submitted with the original application, and a habitat balance report was also submitted. The district undertook a third-party review of those environmental reports, essentially a peer review. A water and sanitary sewer system analysis was done, preliminary geotechnical report, and a flood hazard assessment report was also done. A preliminary traffic impact assessment is underway, and I'll refer to that a bit later on in these slides. So looking at the current OCP, the site is designated Greenway Corridors and Recreation in the center of the slide, and it is surrounded in yellow by areas designated as residential neighborhood. The shape of that Greenway Corridors really reflects the streams that are moving from east to west through the site. The current zoning is CD 12, which applies to the majority of the site, including properties, townhouse properties on Tantalus Road and the Executive Suites Hotel. A small portion in the northeast corner is zoned RS1, and the surrounding areas are a mix of residential, commercial, and CD zoning. So moving on to the development proposal itself, this plan shows you the most recent version of the application, which contains 4 large blue parcels where homes are proposed on 14 hectares of land. The large green area is ecological reserve, covering 33 hectares, and the small areas in orange that don't show up overly well are proposed parklands, which are the more actively used areas with playgrounds and so on. So the majority of the site, roughly 70%, is proposed as ecological reserve. The plans have gone through probably 7 or 8 revisions during the past year or so, and I'll just bring you up to date on the most recent set of changes that have been made. And the changes reflect council input up to this point, as well as there was considerable input from the advisory design panel when the applicants went twice to the ADP. The ADP generally supported the project at the first go-around, but had a number of recommendations. They did support the change in land use, which I think was the fundamental reason for going to the ADP. And they had a lot of suggestions about housing forms and traffic flow. So those comments, as well as council comments, are reflected now. So the residential units, when the project first came in, it started with 520 units. It went down to another version with 460. And we are now, the maps are actually showing 345, but in the zoning bylaw, we are allowing for some flexibility there up to 395 units. The housing mix I'll detail in a minute, but there's a much greater mix of housing forms, and the apartments have been removed from the site. Those were not considered a fit with council or with many of the neighbors. The biggest change, I'll see if I can get the oh, lucky. The biggest change has been the changes to the internal road system. There have been numerous configurations of this. There has, in most of the versions of this plan, been a north-south route that came down the east side of the property and connected through to the road system here. And the road connecting by the hotel to Tantalus Road has had a couple of configurations, including one that swept around the hotel and went up through this green space to connect, to the other roads. So at one point, that Tantalus Road connection was removed, and the ADP felt quite strongly that that third point of access in the middle of the site was really needed. So the road system has come, the Tantalus connection has come back in, but in a much more modified form, where it just comes down the lower part of the site and does not disrupt this large contiguous habitat area. The road system also now has more of a hierarchy, which doesn't show too well at this scale, but there are, within the strata roads, there is more of a hierarchy with collector roads that are wider and have opportunity for the sidewalk directly on the road or adjacent to it, whereas the internal road system within these parcels are your more conventional 6-meter strata roads. So the overall land use, there is 35 hectares of open space, 72% of the site, housing on 13.5 hectares, which is 28%. And the open space has been reconfigured, much more contiguous habitat than any of the previous versions. And the majority of this is now proposed as ecological reserve. When council looked at this plan before, there was quite a lot more effort put into active park use, and that was really at the urging of district staff. We felt that part of what the neighborhood was looking for was more active play areas, but I think both the council and ADP gave the message that the primary purpose here really is habitat protection. So the nature of those park areas has really changed in the revised plan. And as I mentioned, there are 3 access points. Sorry, it's gone off the screen a bit. The access point at the north end of the site at Dowd Road here. The access point from Tantalus Road just south of the hotel, and the 3rd access point off Newport Ridge Drive. The phasing is now proposed to start at the north end of the site. It goes in sequence A, B, C, D. In previous versions, the phasing was planned to start near the hotel, but that has now been changed to the north end of the site. Parking has been revised. One of the benefits that the applicants are proposing is to upgrade Tantalus Road and reconfigure it so that there is on-street parking. There's currently no parking. That was a comment we did hear, that for public use of this proposed park area, there needs to be more public parking. The main strata roads, and I'll show some details in a minute, have opportunity for on-street parking, and the applicants are proposing to dedicate a property on Newport Ridge Drive, which I've covered up unfortunately down here, which is also proposed to function as a parking lot to provide for public access to the site. So the housing unit mix is quite a wide variety. It has really changed from the original concept that was primarily townhouses with apartment buildings. There are 2- and 3-story townhouses, stacked townhouses, up-down duplexes, 2-story cottage units, townhouses with lock-off suites, and some of those are single-level adaptable suites where that is possible, and as I mentioned, up to 395 units max. The densities range, and sorry, these are in units per acre. At the north end of the site where you're adjacent to single family, it's relatively low at 8 units to the acre, and that goes up to 16.5 units to the acre in the Area C neighborhoods. And I don't realize these are a bit fuzzy. I'll just breeze through these fairly quickly. This is the parcel A with 60 units, and one of the concepts that is proposed here. And I did want to mention that these detailed housing layouts are not part of the zoning bylaw. These are the applicant's conceptual plans that will be formalized when there's a DP application. So this is the design as they now understand the site, but the actual layout of these housing units should be considered conceptual at this stage. One of the interesting things where we know there's a concern with the adjacent neighbors about the height and the change in land use and types of building is the concept of a pocket neighborhood here with small cottages, and these do not have internal garages. There's surface parking here which separates the units from the adjacent properties. The zoning bylaw establishes a greater degree of setback around the perimeter of the property wherever it's adjacent to single family, and also reduces the heights in this particular location. There are also conventional townhouses in here and some duplexes, but I think these pocket neighborhoods are certainly an interesting addition to the housing mix. Parcel B, moving down the site, again, this is the Dowd extension coming down, is a mixture of duplexes and townhouses. And moving down to parcel C, it's a fairly spread out parcel with a lot of different site conditions. Again, there is another pocket neighborhood here, as well as more conventional townhouses and some separate cottage units. Parcel D, the bulb at the south end of the site, which is south of the Newport Ridge Drive extension, and this plan shows the public parking lot that is proposed here, is again a mix of housing forms with a fairly large, broad area of protected open space surrounding it, and a wetland and riparian area in the center, again reflecting the current site conditions. So moving on to the environmental review, the detailed bioinventory report contains a lot of detail, which I will just very briefly skim through here. It's a very complex site with high environmental values, both for fish, wildlife, birds, amphibians, all kinds of creatures are doing well there. All the watercourses are fish-bearing. The district, as I mentioned, did engage the peer review to look at the environmental report, and the peer review concluded that the habitat budget proposed for this project is founded on riparian area regulations and is calculated in accordance with the DPA 11 guidelines, and that the habitat budget recommendations are comprehensive and reasonable. And the reason that we had that peer review done was just to be certain that this can proceed under the riparian area regulations, and to, because it's such a high profile project, to just have another look at the report that was submitted. So the main creeks going from north to south, Newport Creek doesn't show too well, but it wraps around at the north end of the site. No Name Creek and Thunderbird Creek are in the center of the site, and Megan Creek runs through the lower part of the site. And again, there are lots of other wetlands that are not labeled on here. The habitat protection and compensation strategy is fairly involved. I guess the first step is to design the project to minimize the development impact on the existing habitat by locating your development within previously disturbed areas, and secondly, by retaining large contiguous areas wherever possible. Minimizing the footprint of trails and roadways by using existing locations, which are primarily the cart paths from the golf course, and narrower roadways. The setbacks that are proposed are 15 meters in the previously disturbed areas, and these are creek setbacks, up to 24.6 meters for Megan Creek using the RAR detailed assessment method, and a 30-meter setback in all other undisturbed areas using the RAR simple assessment method, which is part of your DPA 11 guidelines. The compensation areas focus on wetlands, swamplands, and restoration of setback areas, whereas the current golf course design has put quite a bit of emphasis on ponds. Those ponds have proved not to work particularly well, and the emphasis now is to creating wetlands and swamplands, which have proved to be far more effective at creating actual fish habitat. And a number of best management practices are also part of the recommendation with respect to road design, stream crossings, invasive plants removal. So just looking at the pre and post development maps, I won't go over these in detail, but these are included in the environmental assessment, showing the current situation on the left with the pre-development conditions. And the orange areas are the areas that have been disturbed by the golf course and other development up in the north end. But on the golf course itself, I guess there possibly is some misconception that the golf course is kind of a fully green environment, but in fact, in terms of being productive habitat, it's not. The orange areas are not productive habitat where the golf course has been cleared for fairways and so on. In the post-development habitat on the right-hand side, there are somewhat larger green areas in the middle. The orange areas, which are the development areas, have been grouped together. They're larger, but they are less disruptive to some of the central area. And again, the effort is to try and contain these development areas as much as possible. Near this is the hotel here, and near the hotel site, some of the proposed development is in the form of active park use, which is considered to be an important community amenity in that location. Just looking at the numbers, the habitat balance, as they're required under fisheries legislation, you do have to replace and compensate at a greater degree than the habitat you remove. So the riparian habitat has 2.7 hectares lost through the development, but a gain of 4.6 hectares for a net increase of 1.8 hectares of riparian habitat, And similarly for the aquatic non-riparian habitat, there's a gain of 0.5 hectares. So just looking visually at some of the proposed habitat improvements, I guess the first picture shows you a typical clearing on the golf course site and what it looks like when it's redeveloped as a wetland planted and with the water reestablished there. The roads show that the current cart paths are reconfigured as roads using the roads as they now exist, and that is intended to be a comparable width using real-life examples. And just looking at some of the crossings and other features that are proposed to be used in terms of best management practices for stormwater, use of turfcrete and so on to improve the infiltration on the site. So as part of the development proposal, the applicants have proposed a number of community benefits. This graph shows you the benefits that are generated under the district interim CAC policy, and based on the proposed development, this would generate CACs of 3.1 million. And the applicants are proposing to contribute that amount, with 25% of it going to general amenities, and that is intended to be used for off-site trail development. And the remaining 75%, 2.3 million, contributed toward affordable housing. In addition to those financial contribution, the other benefits proposed are complete restoration of the site, the fish and wildlife habitat before the development proceeds, park and trail construction of both on-site and off-site trails so that all of the trails are ready to go. The applicants are proposing to maintain the habitat and parks for the first 5 years. Land dedications consist of the Ecological Reserve, Parks and Trails, 34.2 hectares. They're also proposing to dedicate Newport Ridge Drive, the right-of-way to extend Newport Ridge Drive to the east, which comprises 0.26 hectares, and the parking site I mentioned on Newport Ridge Drive is another 0.3 hectares. In addition to the financial contribution to affordable housing, they are also proposing to construct 18 units of affordable housing, which is 5% of the total units, and that would be covenanted through a typical housing agreement that the district has done with developers so that they're secured in perpetuity as affordable housing under the definition that the district uses. The developers are also proposing that flex units, which may be adaptable suites, will be put into 5% of the units, and as I mentioned, public parking in a couple of locations. Not sure if anybody's writing there. So just looking at the proposed parks and trails, there's a number of different types of parks and trails. The community park is located here in front of the hotel, taking advantage of the kind of large pond that is there. There are a number of smaller pocket parks, I think 4 of them, that will function as open space both for the public and for the townhouse residents. The trail system consists of a proposed paved accessible loop here, which is relatively level, and that's meant to be a fairly easy route through the site that people can use at all times. It's proposed to be paved and lit. And there are trails, unfortunately, which don't show very well, multi-use trails going up through the site and looping this way to take you through the north part of the site. And those are joined with another trail system here that goes through the townhouse community to another open space park at the end there. And there is another loop that, sorry, they don't show up very well here in yellow, that goes through the south part of the site. And just looking a bit more closely at the open space near the hotel site here, this is an area where there will probably be picnic tables and play facilities for children. Off-site, there are a number of other proposals made. One is an extension of the Wonderland Trail to the north to connect to the existing Wonderland Trail. And secondly, an extension of the corridor trail. So this would be off-road, so people can continue that trail system. The little circles also show the external connections to the east with the existing trails that people are familiar with using. Council raised the issue of maintenance costs at our last meeting. And as I mentioned, Polygon is proposing to maintain all of the parks, trails, and ecological reserve for 5 years. After 5 years, the maintenance will be done by the district, but the Polygon is proposing that this would be funded by the residential strata. The preliminary cost estimates, and this is the number from the district staff, we went over the itemized cost estimates that Polygon had provided, and we went over them with a fine-tooth comb. The operations staff looked at all of the other elements that go into maintaining your trails, and they're pretty familiar with, I think we were down to how many dog bag stations, et cetera, are needed on the trail system. So they took a very close look at what is involved, and the tree management and the invasive species management and so on that needs to be done. So their cost estimate was $150,000 a year. The majority of that probably goes toward the active park area where you've got grass that needs to be mowed and so on, and those types of park systems need more work than the more naturalized areas. We did check with our lawyer about how the payment might be done, and he did say that an annual payment from the Strata Corporation to the district could be included as an equitable charge in the land development agreement, and that has been done in other communities.
Susan, just hold on a moment, we'll see if we can correct the audio.
It's not our song.
Okay. Are you picking it up though? Can people that are watching online hear it?
Very odd, actually.
Doug's phone.
Somebody throw something at it. I think he thinks it's projected. Sorry, I just didn't want, I want to make sure people can hear it.
Let's wait. Let's wait.
Why don't we just take a 2-minute recess while Gary tries to figure it out, if that's all right with everyone? The kettle's boiling in the kitchen.
No, it's good.
Sorry.
Yeah, we're on recess.
must be raised.
Took the bullet for this one.
I'll show you. What's your bet?
You ready to go?
Got it.
Over to you, Susan.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We're gonna thank you.
Just finishing off where we're finishing off this slide. The maintenance costs were an issue that were raised by council, and I think that's why Polygon has come forward with a proposal to fund them through the strata, fund the maintenance through the strata. But I would mention that the other option for council is simply that as a public park, this just be funded the way other public parks are funded, which is through your normal taxation. So, you know, this is proposal put on the table by Polygon, but conventional funding is still an alternative. Just moving on to roads and servicing. The drawing on the right shows the breakdown of units that will be using the different access points. The northern access off Dowwood, there would be approximately, and these are approximate numbers, 160 units using that access point, and 155 units in Area C may use the Tantalus Road entrance, and 80 units down in the lower Area D. I'm guessing there will be some flexibility here, so it's really broken down into two. The northern areas definitely will require the use of Dowwood Road, and areas C and D, there will probably be some overlap in terms of which access they choose to use. So servicing will be done through extension of adjacent municipal services. That's quite straightforward with servicing surrounding the site, except to the east, but all the other areas are serviced around there. The Newport Ridge Drive extension will be an important part of the long-term servicing of this area. And internal roads and services will be strata owned and maintained. There is a preliminary traffic impact assessment underway, and we have not attached that to the report because it's still not yet complete, but I did want to bring forward some of the preliminary information from that report. The trips that are generated from Garibaldi Springs and other development have been calculated by the transportation consultants for Polygon. And what they are showing is during the peak Friday afternoon and Sunday periods, which are what traffic engineers count, Garibaldi Springs accounts for 270 units. Other proposed developments in the area, which are on Tantalus Road, Squamish area Phase 2, and the other nearby developments, as well as 58,000 proposed square feet of commercial space in the general area, account for the majority of new traffic at 930 units, with a total count of additional vehicle trips of 1,200 trips. On Sunday, the numbers are a bit lower, 285 for Garibaldi, 730 for the other developments. And I think it's possibly lower because the commercial use would be lower and the total traffic would be 1015. So the Garibaldi Springs development would comprise 25 roughly to 30% of the additional traffic that's generated. These numbers do not include the Chima lands, which of course, if that were to proceed, would change these numbers considerably. But at this point, Garibaldi Springs, we're ballparking is 25 to 30% of additional traffic. The increase of peak period traffic amounts to 2 to 3 vehicles per minute at Tantalus and Dowwood intersection, and 3 to 4 vehicles per minute at the Tantalus and Newport Ridge Drive intersection. The majority of development, both from Garibaldi Springs and the general area, will and do travel from to and from the areas to the south, and they will use the Garibaldi Way between Highway 99 and Tantalus Road, which is, of course, one of your more difficult intersections with a lot of commercial driveways, a lot of traffic backing up, and sort of a known problem area. So that is one of the things the traffic consultants are looking at, is how to, what are the solutions to that problem. The Garibaldi Springs development will increase traffic volumes on that congested section of road by 19 to 29% during peak hours, 153 to 164 vehicles. So that's kind of the worst period of time. Just looking at some of the possible solutions, and I think part of the challenge with this traffic study, and one of the reasons it hasn't been brought to any conclusion yet, is just what is the role of Garibaldi Springs in solving traffic problems that are pre-existing, particularly access to the highway and how to get people traveling south. So what the traffic consultants are looking at is, first of all, some short-term improvements that can be made. And one of the ones that they are looking at, and of course I should mention that any access to the highway in any direction needs to be approved by the province, and that is really a big part of the challenge. The province doesn't want to see additional access points to the highway because it slows traffic, and so anything new in terms of, it might seem like a natural thing to just put an additional stoplight in somewhere in this area, but that's not something that highways will likely support. So one of the things that's being proposed is a new right-in, right-out access at Newport Ridge Drive. It would require Newport Ridge Drive being extended across Tantalus to the highway. And that would result in an 18% decrease in traffic volumes during the peak period. And I should mention what I mean there is an 18% decrease at that congested intersection at Garibaldi Way. Other short-term solutions are traffic signal changes at Garibaldi Way. The traffic consultants have examined the traffic movements and believe there's a lot of opportunity to make more efficient use of the signal intervals, and that is something they're going to again talk to Highways about and probably come forward with a recommendation. The traffic study will also be identifying thresholds when these short-term measures are insufficient, and that's a fairly important step. A lot of the intersection movements here are going to fail in the not too distant future. They're already at a fairly low level of service. So the longer term options is to, first of all, undertake that broader traffic assessment and really sort out what the options are for improving that highway access, and particularly the movement to the south. And part of that is looking at a new all-movement access to Highway 99, whether that be signalized, unsignalized, possibly a grade-separated intersection, or what's called a flyover, where you're basically going over the highway and coming down possibly on Government Road. Those are all under consideration, and other things that might be looked at in the long term are an additional right out from the mall, which would reduce the traffic at that Garibaldi Way intersection, and other access reconfigurations, which might be 2 left turn lanes to the south where there's currently 1. And I think as part of that longer term solution, what needs to be determined is what is required of Garibaldi Springs as a development being kind of first out the gate, and how to bring in those additional developments so that a more comprehensive solution is both found and cost shared by all of these developments. So that's something we're working at bringing forward, is a possible program to allocate the cost of that study and ultimately the cost of those improvements between the developments that will benefit from these improvements. And that's something we're waiting for the traffic consultants to define. Part of the background that has also been looked at is the geotechnical conditions and requirements for flood protection. The area is in the Squamish River floodplain. It's considered to be a restricted, limited, and conditional densification area in your integrated flood hazard management plan. The flood hazard review recommended a 10.8 meter flood construction level. There are a variety of soil types, slopes, and water table conditions throughout the site, so different solutions are needed in different locations. Preloading is likely required for some of the road and building sites due to compressible silt soils, and filling will be required and is proposed to be limited just to the areas that it's needed to raise the roads and buildings, estimated at 0.5 meter to 1 meter of fill. And as is standard practice in the district, a flood covenant will be required prior to zoning approval. So just moving on to the actual bylaws that are on the agenda tonight, the proposed OCP amendment, Bylaw 2478, proposes that the 4 parcels in blue be redesignated as residential neighborhood. Currently, the whole site is greenway corridors and recreation. So the remainder of the site would remain greenway corridors and recreation, and residential designation would just apply to the blue areas. For the zoning amendment, we have drafted a new RM4 zone to apply to those housing areas, and have done that to bring in the mix of housing types that are proposed, which is a mix that is not present in any of your other current zones. We've also proposed a new P4 zone, which applies to the open space areas here, and that is titled Ecological Reserve Zone, again to correspond to the function that is intended for this site, which is really quite different from your P3 zone. The P4 zone, I'm sorry about the coloring, I'll have to get a better map for second reading, but the P4 zone is also intended to apply to these district-owned lands that were dedicated at the time of the original golf course development that are also habitat protection areas. So that P4 zone will be applied to both colors of green. The P3 zone, which is your park institutional zone, will apply to the active park areas, which are shown in orange, as well as the proposed parking area on Newport Ridge Drive. And the reason for breaking those down, your P3 zone allows for a whole wide variety of things, colleges, universities, parks. So we wanted to come up with a very restricted range of uses for the P4 zone. One thing I should mention, and should mentioned earlier, the clubhouse site in previous versions of this plan was proposed to be dedicated to the district, possibly as a building that could be rented to offset park costs. And for a variety of reasons, the district staff have recommended that offer not be followed through on. It's not a building that really suits the district's needs for community use. So that is not a part of the zoning application. It is meant to stay zone CD12. And I've just mentioned the limited uses in the proposed P4 zone is really the primary function, habitat protection, management, and enhancement. So just moving on to the public input, I mentioned that there was early public input provided to council on May 23rd, and there has been a range of comments received in the August to December period of 2016. And those, I would say, primarily were opposed to the project. There was a lot of objection to the OCP amendment in particular. In 2017, there was more recent input in the May to January period that included both support and opposition to the project, but I would say most generally the trend has been toward more support for the project than we first heard. There has been also support from a number of organizations and groups, including the Executive Suites Hotel, Megan Creek Strata owners, Executive Suites Strata owners, the Squamish River Watershed Society, and the Squamish Trails Society. The issues raised really relate to the OCP should not be amended. Housing can go elsewhere. The habitat areas are not suited for development, and traffic impacts were mentioned by many people. Those in favor of the project believe this was an opportunity for restoration and better management of the environmentally sensitive areas. It's an opportunity for parks and trails. A number of letters believe the housing has been carefully sited with minimal impact to adjacent areas, and that the proposed mix of housing is needed in the community. The planning review, we basically do support this project moving forward to first reading on the premise that it fits with many of your OCP policies, particularly the improvement to the ecological functioning of the site, which is principle 1 of your sustainability guiding principles. The significant green network that protects ecologically sensitive areas is part of your OCP policies, and as is long-term stewardship through municipal ownership of those environmentally sensitive areas. The proposed development is also consistent with many of the OCP growth management and smart growth principles, with better utilization of adjacent municipal infrastructure. The variety of housing forms meets the needs of the whole community and provides compact housing forms that are compatible with adjacent areas. The proposed site is also within the urban containment boundary, both in your current and your new OCP. So the recommendations are that the two bylaws, OCP amendment and zoning amendment, be given first reading, and that prior to scheduling a public hearing, the traffic impact assessment be completed, the bylaws be referred to external agencies, and that a formal public information meeting be held. So, thank you.
Council, are there any questions? Probably a silly question. Why don't I start at the end of the show?
Yep, thank you. I have a bunch of questions. My interest is in the liability for the strata. So if the strata is paying into a park and is paying on a regular basis, who would the district maintain the liability insurance, or how is the liability insurance paid for? And if there's an accident and the strata is paying for it, do they have the ability to cut their funding off?
Could you answer that?
Sure, I can answer that question. So the district parks would be owned by the district, and the liability would be with the district. Strata would simply make a payment that would be associated with the maintenance cost for the park. The district has insurance under the municipal insurance agency, which covers any liabilities on district property, such as any accidents. Now, we've taken a look at the recent past. Within the last 5 years, we haven't had any claims for injuries on district property, so I think it's safe to say that these occurrences are covered, but are rare.
Can I just?
Yeah, so just to clarify, the parks and trails would be municipally owned.
Yes.
That's
Does
right.
the strata have the ability?
They're not strata parks.
Right, exactly, but does the strata have the ability to vote on and decide not to pay their, if they decide that they don't want to be funders of a municipal asset anymore? If it's a publicly used park, can the strata say this is a publicly used park and we're not going to pay for it?
It would be a charge against the strata's property to make that payment. So it would be the strata would be legally committed to making that payment, and there would be legal consequences if the strata didn't follow through.
And maybe, I'll ask Jonas to go a little bit further. This is not a new concept. This is done in other communities. I don't know if you have examples of that, but.
It is done in other communities. I don't have examples off the top of my head, but we have confirmed with our lawyer that it's a fairly irregular practice. So it is something that other communities do.
I have a few more questions,
Yeah,
but I can wait till
why
we
don't
go
you do
through.
one more and then we'll go down the.
Okay, the roads are, has the fire department's reviewed the roads and they're all fire truck accessible and with turnarounds for the fire department?
Through the mayor, that's correct. The fire department's been involved in the process.
So I have one more quick one.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, who manages the clubhouse?
What clubhouse?
The clubhouse that's currently on the,
The clubhouse is
It's
not
not
part of the
yours.
proposal.
but
Although, I
is
think
it
there's at
it's
least-
owned by the proponents or?
Go ahead.
If I may. The clubhouse currently is owned by the landowner, who's Polygon, and at this point, we're recommending that it remain the same. Now, the owner might come up with another ownership structure for that building, but at first reading, we recommend that it would remain in the owner's hands.
So it doesn't actually, does it go to the public then? So it is not a public amenity, it can't be, it's not usable by events or anything?
At this time, it is not, and that was based on the maintenance that would be involved with the district taking ownership of that building.
Thank you.
Was there a lease portion of that was on offer to the district?
Through the mayor, the clubhouse site is zoned CD12, and it is owned by Polygon, and they do lease it to the hotel for events, and they lease it for public events as well. And I believe they plan to continue doing that. So there still will be public use, but it won't be something the district manages because the district won't be owning that. It'll still be done through Polygon.
Perfect.
I thought I read something about the bottom layer being public washrooms possibly and would be leased out to the district, not the top meeting rooms where the hotel uses.
There was an earlier concept to do that, and what the Polygon is proposing is they are committed, and I should have mentioned this in the presentation, they are committed to providing public washrooms as part of their park upgrades. Whether it's unlikely those washrooms are going to be located directly in the clubhouse building. It might be a separate building next to the clubhouse. So that detail actually hasn't been worked out. I guess at this point, the only thing that has been confirmed is the district staff recommended the district not own that building as a source of revenue or as a community use building. So Polygon will continue to own it, and the relationship with the hotel at this point continues, where the hotel uses it for events and the public uses it for events.
Councillor Race, are you ready?
Thank you. So it's back to this the strata fee or the strata maintenance of the park issue. I can tell you I acted for the developer of Amblepath, and there is one of those arrangements in place for the strata of Amblepath to pay for the maintenance of the train crossing signaling. So there are such agreements in place in Squamish. But I do have a concern about that, and I understand the intent of this is that the development will, in perpetuity, pay for the maintenance of the park area and the green area. So I have two questions around that. One, is that number of $150,000 changeable from year to year, and if so, by whom, to reflect different costs, inflation, rising costs, other events that aren't foreseeable today? And the second thing is around enforcement. My concern about enforcement is not that the scheme gets put in place, but that down the road, if you did have a rogue strata council decide that they were not going to pay and the membership voted not to do it, and this might be 20 years from now, the district's remedy is just to sue and contract and then to chase after them to recover a judgment. And while they might ultimately get it, it's a bit more cumbersome than if it was just attached to taxation. So this statement was made in the presentation that one of the options was just normal municipal taxation. Are you talking about the municipality as a whole, or the development as a whole just being taxed for those costs?
Well,
It's a
through the-
long question.
Yeah, through the mayor, on the issue of that alternative, it could be done either way. The district does structure local improvement areas, local service areas as one option, and district-wide taxation is, possibly a more fair route if it's a district-wide park. That's kind of the more conventional way to fund your park costs. We haven't explored either of those in detail. I guess at this point we're just putting the proposal from Polygon in front of us, but that's something prior to second reading, we can certainly come back with more information on those two options. I think they're both workable. I guess the issue would be who is the park serving and who therefore is the most appropriate body to pay for it.
And the first part of the question was, is there a mechanism to adjust those costs over time as they might change?
When we spoke with the lawyer, he advised that this would be included in the land development agreement first and foremost, and that would include opportunities to increase the cost annually. We would write all of those things into the land development agreement, that commitment for an annual increase, cost of living increase, and possibly revisiting major upgrades at a certain interval. All of those details can be written into the land development agreement.
Thank you. Thank you.
Australia, thank you. So I have some questions about the hierarchy of the trail network. So I understand the sort of multi-purpose loop around the Central Park area, which would be paved and lit and accessible to all. But the rest of this land, aside from the pocket parks, is really about ecological reserve. And so I'm wondering about the treatment of the trails that cut north and south, whether we're paving those, and is that ecologically friendly or is that operationally friendly? Because I want to make sure we're doing right by this ecological reserve.
Well, I'll speak to that initially, and through the mayor, Jonas may want to add to this. We've had quite a lot of internal discussion about the width and functioning and paving and lighting of those trails. I think probably ecologically the best thing would be to leave them as a permeable surface with no lighting, but internally there's a lot of desire for active transportation and to make sure people can move safely through the neighborhood at night. People can get from their homes to the major roads where there's bus routes. And so that's what's really driven the paving. And so it's proposed that there be major pathways that are paved and lit for active transportation purposes, really to facilitate people moving through the site. That's the kind of the compromise that we've worked out, is a portion of the trails are paved, but the idea is to really give people the ability to move safely. Within the strata development itself, where there are secondary trails, those don't need to be paved. They do need to be hard surface, but that's a hard granular surface that's more permeable. So there is a potential contradiction between the environmental protection and the active transportation, but it's an attempt to balance those two needs.
Yeah. Which trails are not paved? Can you tell?
I'll see if I can find a map that might show that. Unfortunately, let's see if I can get to it more quickly here.
We can dim the lights again.
Oops. I lost it. I don't know. Sorry, with Jonas's help, I've lost my map. Hang on a second here.
Well done, Jonas.
Actually, these close-up maps may actually be more helpful than looking at the overall. I'll just use, no, I'll go back to the overall map. Getting close, sorry. I'm working from memory here because there is actually quite a complex pattern of parks and trails, but the multi-use trail that is shown in yellow that goes up and around here is proposed to be paved. And that would probably be a, oh, sorry, 2. This would be a 2.5 to 3 meter. Sorry, I'm just trying to get this thing working again. There we are. This yellow trail.
No, you gotta take it.
Jonas, is there a page in our agenda so council may look at it closer?
46.
46, thank you.
It's such a big site, it's actually hard to show on an 8.5 by 11 page. I'll just try and get this thing working here. Oh, here we are. Okay, I have the arrow working. This multi-use trail that runs up through here and circles around is meant to be paved as kind of a collector from all of the neighborhoods to allow them to move down. Similarly, aside from the accessible use that is paved, there is another system here that runs around that is also proposed to be paved. So those 2 major trail networks are meant to be paved to connect people in these different neighborhoods to allow them to move from place to place and to move back to the major road system.
Yeah, I guess with the extension of the corridor trail and the access point at the clubhouse, I'm just curious about whether we need all of that pavement and what that does to our operational costs. I'm concerned that we just don't have the balance yet right, especially not so much the ones that are through the neighborhoods and that multi-use path around the major park, but whether we want people to be using that connection at night or whether we want them on the corridor trail and using the roads at night. So that's my question. My other question was around the expectation that we would set for what it is to maintain this park for these residents. So if the strata is paying for it, how will we set expectations for what their money is contributing towards? So are we clearing these paths, like snow clearing? Are we, I mean, what are we doing with $150,000 a year?
If I may. So maybe to back up to your point about the trail pavement, I think it's a very valid point, and I think there are potentially opportunities to sort of have some major connectors paved and others left in a more natural state. The one key route in particular is the trail identified as multi-use trail there that goes sort of from the hotel to the second development phase. We see that as a key connection for those northern people to get down to the hub area where the main park is, and also to get out onto Tantalus Road. So,
but the eastern trail, maybe not so much?
That is a possibility. That could be one that we can look at not paving. To your point on maintenance, again, it'll be, speaking with the operations department, they see it as sort of a hierarchy. There are certain trails, the key trails, the accessible loop, that multi-use trail that will be cleared on a regular basis as all of the paths are in the district. Other ones that are more secondary, maybe aren't used for commuting or active transportation so much, but provide a nice nature walk, for example. Those trails may not get snow cleared or have quite as a robust maintenance program in general. So.
But would we spell that out? Sorry. In the land development agreement. So I just don't want to get 346 letters after the first major snowfall saying, why haven't you cleared our path?
Absolutely, and that will be clearly identified, what level of effort and maintenance will be put towards each area or each section of trail.
Okay, and finally, I share some of the concerns of my colleagues around how this is paid for, and also just the equity. This is, I think this community benefits from sitting next to an ecological reserve, and so I think those residents should pay a premium for having that protected area around them. But at the same time, this is a really big park that has connectivity and will be used by many, many people in the district. And so, given that these people will be paying property taxes and possibly a premium, I'm not sure that they should bear the full cost. It will be a district park, and so perhaps between first and second reading is looking at different opportunities for how to collect that payment. I think it actually should be done through taxation, but whether there's a more equitable way to share those costs with that development. I'm not sure it should be 100% by those residents. We will all benefit if this goes ahead from that part.
Councilor Buckingham, any questions?
Yeah, and I'll start with, since we're on the topic of the park thing, I sort of see it a little bit of a different way. I actually think that, you know, if we were to look at where we would put our next park expansion as far as a public park intensive use, I don't think it would be in this area. And we even struggled talking around the council table last week about, you know, where do we come up with $200,000 or $300,000 to build a piddly little spray park, and yet we're thinking about how we're going to get 5-acre park built there that all of a sudden we're going to do. So, I mean, really, at the end of the day, I think that should be a local service area thing. I think that's a great idea if we're going to do it from taxation that way. And also, I was wondering about the general amenity amount, which was the $800,000. I thought, I was under the impression that we as a council were trying to get away from when we collect a CAC in having the applicant tell us where the money was going to be applied. So, and thinking again that perhaps, you know, that $800,000 might be better spent in another more densely populated area with lower income residents who, you know, may not be able to get in their car and drive up to this new park here. So just hoping that perhaps maybe we could keep the ultimate flexibility in that, and just I'll leave that for everyone to consider. Question, just for clarification purposes, before the application came in for the amendment to the OCP, what was the current development potential on the entire site in terms of approximate number of units?
Are we referring to the current zoning?
Correct.
So the current zoning would only allow development of single-family homes on that northern piece of the property. And the, I think it was 40 units or so.
Oh, there have been, that was a very conceptual plan. I don't know that you'd get that many units, but yeah, the RS1 is the only developable area. I'd say in the range of 25 to 40 units.
I'm trying to get a sense of the land lift, because obviously the developer has done the calculation. If they've come up with a CAC number based on the number of additional square footage that they're gaining, then we must know that number. So I'll take, let's say it's 30 or 40 units. So we're going from 30 or 40 units to almost 400 units. And when I think about this, as a greenfield site. I mean, it really literally is a greenfield site. It's a greenway corridor designation. And in my mind, when we developed the interim CAC policy, for me that was for infill development. That was for, you know, a little townhouse project there, a little development here, you know, to kind of give those guidelines to pay cash in lieu, so that, you know, where it didn't make sense to, you know, be able to build a certain number of units on site. So I'm very disappointed, you know, the 2.4 million for affordable housing, given the special circumstances of this site, I would think that perhaps the applicant may want to reconsider that number, just given the fact that this is a very greenfield type of site, and we know that the direction we're going in is more complete communities in terms of mixed income housing. And so the threshold for affordable housing in these new greenfield areas is going to be significantly higher than what has been proposed here. So I think that is a very important thing to consider. I mean, I definitely appreciate the fact that I'm seeing changes in the new iteration that has seen a compression of the footprint. But let's not forget the fact that for all intents and purposes, this is a greenfield development. This is at the end of our infrastructure. It's going to cause some failures in our road system that we're going to need to address. And it is also going to be not exactly the most efficient provision of infrastructure, given the pocket size of development. And, you know, I think we need to really, really take that into consideration when we as a council are evaluating this kind of proposal. Because, yeah, I mean, it's because of its ecological values and its prime location, there will be a premium earned on these properties, absolutely. So I just wanted to put that forward as we are in first reading, and there are opportunities for adjustments as we go forward and as we hear from the public. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good questions. Just on the trails, I didn't catch how many kilometers of trail there was. Was it 4.1? I just heard the number and then the page flipped.
4.3.
4.3.
So are those mostly existing trails now?
Yeah, through the mayor, most of the trails are built on existing cart pathways that are through the site.
And are they being used?
Yes.
So the main commuter trails in there being used?
Well, the property is private property at this point, so it's not public land to be used for trail use. I think they were in use as on the golf course.
Yeah, so you don't know if it's being used?
I understand that it's being used informally.
And then on the parks themselves, it's district staff that's going to be doing the maintenance on those parks?
Yes, that's correct.
Like right from the get-go, or the first 5 years as well as?
No, through the mayor, the applicants are proposing to do the maintenance for the first 5 years, at which time it would transfer to the district. Yes.
Okay. And we can adjust the costs as time goes on?
Yes.
On those?
Through the mayor, yes, that's what we would build into the land development agreement to make sure there's, you know, a future reconsideration of those costs.
So, and then the mixed of housing, I noticed there's a few pockets of these little, are they single family or single floor, like ranchers?
Through the mayor, you know, these are really very conceptual designs. As I mentioned, there's no actual housing designs been submitted, but what the applicant has described is two-story cottages with a living unit on each floor. So they would be quite small. They'd be two-story, yeah.
And the habitat, well, from what I get reading the report, we're going to actually increase quite a bit of habitat there through adding, rewatering some areas and stuff like that.
Yes, that's correct. That's the basic premise is, you know, there's a lot of the habitat that is not functioning well on the site. The ponds and streams are not working very well. So they're required under the Fisheries Act to replace and increase the amount of habitat for any lost habitat.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I do voice Jason's concerns about the land lift and what might be defined as affordable on this site at some point. But that's not one of my main concerns. You did the math and said we were talking about the FCL in this site would be 10.8. But then you also said it would require about another meter of fill. So can you equate that for me?
Yeah, through the mayor. So The FCL for the entire site is 8.8 meters. Current elevations are between maybe 6.5 and 8 meters or so. Essentially, the main risk on the site is deep water, where the depth is over 2.5 meters. That's unacceptable. So in areas of the roadways and the areas immediately adjacent to buildings, we'd need some fill placement there to ensure that that depth is not, there's no depth greater than 2.5 meters in those areas on the roads and what have you. And then the rest of the lift to attain the FCL would be through structural means, garage or non-habitable space.
I think what concerns me a little is the riparian sensitivity of those creeks and the salmon. In fact, they're all salmon-bearing creeks. And the stormwater runoff, although I know you have said you've done a study on that, I just worry a little bit about those, for lack of a better term, islands of development in there and the runoff from that going into those creeks at high runoff and high water periods.
Through the mayor, as we proceed into detailed design, and full integrated stormwater management plan will need to be completed. And at that point, we'll be able to assess the stormwater from a holistic perspective, coming from down the hill from the east, how it goes through the site, and then how it gets out of the site to the west as well. So that will all be determined in a detailed design phase.
We also have some very large concerns about the traffic issues, traffic study, given the nature of that, especially the Tantalus and Garibaldi intersection. Thank you.
I think I have a few questions and then I'll go back to council. With regard to the proposal, the possibility of improving Newport Ridge Drive, I'm not sure if you can go to that slide that just shows the interface. Is the proposal that the developer pay for that road extension and the access and egress onto the highway?
Yes, in response to the mayor, that is the proposal, that those short-term solutions would be paid for by the developer, which would include that right-in, right-out at Newport Ridge Drive, if that's acceptable to the province.
Thank you. With regard to the clubhouse, I appreciate that staff doesn't want to get into owning something that we have to maintain. But one thing I was hoping to see in the proposal was some sort of confirmation of provision of daycare space. I know that the units are going to be designed such that in-home daycare could be provided there, and we do allow them through our bylaws, but I think purpose-built daycare is more sustainable, and we should always be thinking of both in-home and purpose-built. Is the clubhouse or the basement of the clubhouse, I appreciate that the hotel has important needs for the meeting space upstairs, but would the basement part of the clubhouse be appropriate for, could it be converted into a daycare space? It's right beside the park. And would that be something we could covenant into a land development agreement for 30 years or something like that? And would we want to do it, I guess?
Through the mayor, I don't have quick answers to those questions. We haven't looked into that. I guess we'd have to look at this structural suitability. You know, there's building code requirements for any kind of assembly use, and I don't know whether that building would meet those requirements, but we can certainly look into that. And I guess we can also put it out to the applicants that to see what other ideas they might have for purpose-built daycare if that building is not suitable. I don't have answers off the top of my head to that.
Yeah, and I think just echoing a little bit of Councillor Blackman-Wolf's comments with regard to trying to understand this application in the context of a greenfield development and what an appropriate CAC would be for a greenfield versus infill development. And we're still sort of figuring that out ourselves, and this is sort of one of the first projects that's sort of testing that a little bit. So I'm trying to, just sort of as a general comment, get my brain around how to evaluate this proposal, because there's obviously a lot of upside with the ecological values and connectivity and some housing diversity, but trying to really put a bit of a lens on creating a differential between a greenfield development and an infill development in terms of our expectations. It seems to be quite relatively robust, but I still haven't got my brain around whether or not it really is robust enough for what could be considered a greenfield development. So just wanted to maybe make that comment. Maybe I'll just go back to Councillor Strauss, who's just got some follow-up questions.
Thank you. Yeah, I still have a few more questions. The Housing Authority in Whistler currently designates 10 to 15% of their units when a new development comes in. We haven't developed a housing authority or a way to manage our housing yet. This proposal basically only gives us 4%. It says 5%, but the math is 4.5, and since we can't do half the house, I'd say 4%. So 4% of units to the district, 18 affordable units that aren't necessarily affordable, they're not stated as affordable. And since we have no way to manage them, I'm wondering why we came up with the number of 18 and why we wouldn't require more, for the same reason that Councillor Bachman-Wolf stated, that this is a greenfield development, it's at the end of infrastructure. Second question, I'll let you answer them as well, is infrastructure development. Is the infrastructure renewal going to be funded? Basically, the housing density in there won't pay for infrastructure renewal. So is it strata that pays for water, sewer renewal, or is it district that pays for that renewal? And then I have the same concerns about the trails going through the ecological reserve and the connectivity of the habitat connectivity and the species at risk connectivity. Basically, the parcels of development cut the species travel to their ecological habitats right off. It actually pockets the ecological reserve, which doesn't give connectivity for species which are actually species at risk, which is a deep concern of mine as well on this site.
I can answer a few of the questions. So in terms of the fact that we do not currently have a housing authority, that is true. We don't have a housing authority. We're working on a structure that will help us manage those affordable housing units that are coming through a number of developments. So I think we need, the expectation is that we will, by the time that this development is ready for occupancy, the district will have to have some sort of system to make sure that these units remain affordable. It's not that the district will be owning the units, but to make sure that the ownership of those units or the rental rates remain as agreed upon in the land development agreement. And there will be a housing agreement to go with it. So those units will be affordable to whatever definition the district has. And we do currently have a definition of what is affordable. In terms of 18 units, the land development agreement we were proposing is to follow the same form as the waterfront landing did, which was 5% of the units. And so we're at first reading, and the unit type might fluctuate as we go through this process. But I believe what we have an offer from the applicant for is that 5% of the units are affordable. Plus the cash contribution. So this proposal does exceed our community advantage contribution policy right now, which says just the cash in lieu. This is a cash in lieu plus the units on site.
Can I comment on that one thing? So my concern is employee housing as well. So we currently I'm not sure why we wouldn't follow. We have the same housing, even possibly exceeding the housing difficulties of our neighbors to the north, which require 10 to 15%. So we have brownfield development, which is walkable distance to downtown, and we accepted 5% because we didn't have an authority, and that's what we accepted for waterfront. This is greenfield development. It's basically car and walking through an ecological reserve accessible. But why would we only accept 5%? Is it just because we based it on a brownfield development or random number?
No, this again would, in terms of affordable housing contribution, would exceed the waterfront landing example. The waterfront landing example did 5%. This development is proposing to do 5%. It's proposing to do additional market rental units, and is proposing to do a cash in lieu for the full interim CAC target. So it would be exceeding the waterfront landing example, in that it's doing both cash in lieu and providing us with some units. In addition to that, the developer is offering a parking at the end of Report Drive, which could in the future be converted to an affordable housing site. So that is something to keep in mind, that, you know, as parking patterns change, there may be other opportunities on this property to convert land into affordable housing.
Thank you. Okay, and the infrastructure?
I could speak to that. So the on-site utilities, water, sanitary, storm, the current proposal is that they will be strata, owned and maintained. And it has a much higher chance of success than it would if it were being managed by a single strata, in that each of the development pockets will be their own strata, and the maintenance of those important utilities will be then overseen by sort of an umbrella strata from that will have members of all the individual stratas. So what that will do is that, you know, every one of those individual stratas would have to back out of the plan to maintain and fund the infrastructure, which is highly unlikely. So the district sees that as a way to ensure that the infrastructure will be well maintained, as opposed to the district owning it.
Do other areas in the district pay for their own infrastructure renewal?
There are some developments that have strata-owned utilities, yes. Not at this scale.
Not a large, like a site like this. Thank you.
And then the last point I wanted to speak to was the habitat connectivity. One of the key changes that's happened since the previous version of the site plan is there was actually a north-south road connecting the sort of the north end of the site to the south end of the site, as Susan mentioned. That's actually been taken out to improve habitat connectivity in that area. There's still a trail there, but there will be crossings for amphibians and other creatures. In the other areas of the development, some areas will be inaccessible to the creatures and the habitat there. However, a lot of the creek crossings and some of the road connections will have critter crossings, essentially. So it'll be designed to allow movement of these species from one side of these development pockets to the other.
Any other questions? Councillor Race and Councillor Witt.
Thank you. Just with respect to the P4 zoning, or the green space, it's to remain green space. I think over time I've heard a couple of different things, and one is protected by covenant. And today you were talking about protected by P4 zoning. Is it intended to put a covenant on these lands, and if so, in favor of whom?
Through the mayor, the zoning is really just to put in a new zone in place that reflects the intended use and gets away from all of those other uses that are allowed in your P3 zone. It is likely there will also be an environmental covenant attached as part of the land development agreement, so that all of the recommendations of the environmental report are followed. I think that would be kind of a standard practice to do both.
And they are in favor of the district?
Yes.
So, but the district would own the property, be the landowner of those properties, because they would be dedicated, and they would also have a covenant in favor of them. So they could discharge them if they chose to do that. A future council could discharge those, because there is no other party to it.
Yes.
So I'll leave it with you to think about that, whether you want to add a third party to those covenants, so that, I mean, I spoke about rogue strata councils. You can always also have rogue councils in the future who might, for some reason, see a different use for those properties. And if we truly wanted to preserve them in perpetuity, if you had a third party, whether it's the Ministry of the Environment or a nature trust or something, as a party to those covenants. So I'll leave you to think about that. The other is with respect to the cottages. Material I have shows one level, and you mentioned 2 level. And this came from the developer, and I appreciate, you know, the design concepts are preliminary, but is there a maximum height contemplated? Do you have a number for that?
Through the mayor, unfortunately, I just got those drawings a few minutes before the meeting, so there's a bit of vagueness in my answer here. I understood originally there were to be one-story cottages, then I was told there were two. So I'll have to clarify that when we come forward for second reading. And because I didn't have those drawings available till just recently. In terms of heights, there is a table in the zoning bylaw that I've actually hidden in the slides here. I'll just find it. Here it is. The proposed zoning regulations. So there is a maximum height proposed of 10.68 meters, and this is in this, well, my arrows disappeared here. The proposal for the RM4 zone, we've got a 0.62 FAR, and in the next column we've compared this to the RM2 medium density zone, which is a typical townhouse zone. So the density at 0.62 FAR is below the RM2 zone. Maximum lot coverage is similar, although it does jump up a bit in parcel D. Maximum height, 10.68 meters, which is a typical townhouse zone, except 9 meters adjacent to the RS zone lots. And so 9 meters would be a 2-story height. And we've also got a 6-meter setback around the perimeter of the property, except 9.15 meters adjacent to RS zone lots, so that there's a greater setback. These parameters are in the zoning bylaw, but I think Jonas and I have been talking that as we move forward with more detail, and as this package that was delivered today shows, I think there's an expectation that some of these design features get carried forward beyond what is shown in the zoning bylaw. So that is something we're going to talk with the developer about possibly formalizing some of these concepts beyond what can be done in a zoning bylaw that is regulatory, and actually confirming some of these design aspects in more detail and attaching them to the land development agreement. So
Yeah.
we haven't done that yet.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think that is important. Height, I know from talking to people in the community, is quite sensitive at the north end.
Yes.
Which is where one of those pockets of cottages is, and the other one I'm not so sure. So I think it's going to be quite important to define that carefully. It's not RS1, which is what it presently is. It's not intended to be that, which I guess would be the 10-point-something meters, 3 floors in effect. My understanding is this was going to be significantly lower, and part of the reason for that was to accommodate the people who are in behind that or just to the north of that. So I think it will be important to define that. And if I have one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned, I think the existing zoning on that site is P3, and Councillor Blackman-Wolf asked you what the development potential was of the site. For residential, I understand there's just the one corner with RS1, that top corner. But other things could be put on that site as it stands today, and I think one of the ones you mentioned was schools or universities or something of that nature.
Yes.
Would you expand on that just a little bit? What might be on that site if it was not zoned, not rezoned?
Through the mayor, I should clarify the existing zoning on the entire site is actually CD12, which on the majority of that property, it's the CD12 zone with the little RS1 corner at the top north end, adjacent to the single family. And the CD12 zone only allows golf course use. So it's not zoned P3. The reason that we looked at P3 zoning, that's the zone that you typically use for your parks. Most of your parks are zoned P3, parks institutional zone. But that zone is not really a good fit for this land because it allows for so many other things that are not consistent with habitat protection. You know, schools, universities, colleges, a range of institutional uses are permitted in your P3 zone. So for that reason, we decided not to use that zone and to put a new P4 ecological reserve zone in place. The current zoning for the 90% of the site is CD12, and it only permits a golf course on this portion.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate something that Councillor Race brought up. I think we were all surprised by the 2-story cottage because the book that the developer proposed, and I talked with the developer this morning, talked about one-story cottages. And for me, I think there's a real need for one-story cottages, particularly amongst seniors community and young homeowners. So that diversity of housing, it's important, I think, to ensure that that different housing vernacular is embedded in this somehow. I'm just going to look to council if there's any more questions at this point. Councillor Elliott.
In regards to the traffic study, you mentioned that that the consulting company doing the traffic study would be recommending some short-term solutions, and there's some debate about how much the Garibaldi Springs proposal would be responsible for them. But what happens in the short term if we want to put in lights or make some changes to the intersection at Tantalus and Garibaldi Way? Who becomes responsible for those costs, and when does that happen? So what do we mean by short term?
Through the mayor, because we don't have the traffic study yet, some of these questions are somewhat difficult to answer. I think part of the reason we're struggling with a few questions tonight is we've been deferring a few things to see what council's interest is in moving the project forward before we ask the developer to undertake further studies. So we will come forward with a defined program of what the developer is required to do and what it, and speaking specifically to traffic, what their traffic consultant will recommend a program of actions that need to be taken to support the project and reduce the traffic impacts of this project, and timelines will be established for when those things need to be done. Some of them may need to be done right away, so we will come forward with a more specific program. I think the purpose of the slides I put up tonight was just to indicate what the issues were and what some of the potential options are when we get the final study. And ideally, we'll have that before we move to second reading. We'll bring forward more concrete information.
And as part of that study, will we have a chance to refer some of the suggestions from the development, from the consultant to MOTI to gauge their response?
That's actually an essential part of it. The traffic consultants, I think everyone's aware that none of those actions can be taken without MOTI approval. We have had an initial meeting with the traffic consultants and MOTI early in the project to kind of put all of these issues on the table. And I think it's well understood that provincial approval is needed for anything that has to do with the highway. Even things like changing the traffic signals require their approval. So there will be ongoing communication with the minister.
If I could just add something to this. You specifically mentioned improvements at Tantalus and Garibaldi Way. I believe there's actually a project in the DCC bylaw for improvements at that intersection, so that could be done as a separate work. And just further to Susan, we actually were trying to arrange a second meeting with the Ministry of Transportation to sort of go through some of these preliminary options that they've put on the table now.
Okay.
Any other questions? I'll go to Councillor Cryer.
Yeah, just so I know I heard you right on the traffic, there is other development in that area that's contributing to the traffic problems. Is that right? Are you referring up to the stuff up the hill?
Yeah, through the mayor.
Yeah.
Yes, so we're kind of looking, it's a difficult site there, like Susan mentioned, they're the first large development, sort of one of the first large developments going through in that area. And for the purposes of this study that we're looking at here, they're kind of assessing the Thunderbird Creek lands, Sky Ridge, and a couple of the sort of multi-use developments around Tantalus. So that'll be incorporated in this. Some of the longer term improvements that are going to be required, we're going to have to take a look at the responsibility of each of those developments for those.
Thanks. Councillor Scott?
Thank you. Is all of A, pocket area, the original designated RS1 zoning that is, or is it just a piece of that? the original area?
No. This map, through the mayor, the RS1 area is the, doesn't show too well, but is the top corner here of parcel A. The remainder, I would say it's maybe a quarter of parcel A. The rest is part of the CD12 zone. So the original RS1 zone is just that top corner of parcel A.
Right, and that is that being used in its entirety? My question is, did staff at all look at the densification of the original benchland zoning and require ecological changes in the land that's currently zone green? So obtaining the benefits of ecological reserve at the same time as densifying the top lot on its own, or has it only been looked at in its entirety? As well, did staff consider a population cap, considering we have so much on the books?
We looked at the site as a whole. We understand that most of the site cannot be developed. And so the ecological functioning takes priority. And we looked at developable areas, and parcel A is the one area that lacks ecological sensitivity. So that's why it's been expanded fully. In terms of population cap, we are introducing population thresholds as an idea in the draft official community plan. But because this area is surrounded by development and it's within our proposed growth boundary, that we did not look at a population threshold that would be affecting these lands.
I follow up with
Yeah, go ahead.
So if we were to just rezone A, we could in fact put a population cap on and say when we reach X number, because this is still greenways. It's not, because it is still greenways, could we extend the development of B, C, and D out until we actually need development, and then work on trails and park, keeping those areas out and still make the area accessible to the public while densifying and allowing the developer to plan for the future of development of B, C, and D? Is that something that was considered? I just, this whole, like, we either do this or we do this, seems like an odd thing when we have, how many houses do we have on the books right now with SODC, waterfront landing, and, Mamquam Blind Channel, all of the areas of development targets homes on the corridor?
Yeah, it's good. This area is considered as part of our existing community. So because it's not on a peripheral area, it's not considered as a future growth area. That's why the population thresholds were never considered at our staff review. Now,
Right, but could it be considered?
council could absolutely phase this development, in many different ways.
Yes.
What we're proposing is that because it's not peripheral and because it will be connecting to developments uphill, that the site as a whole be looked at this
But
point.
it still removes green space from our current OCP.
Well, it's greenway corridors and recreation, which the designation was there for the golf course use. So it's not publicly accessible at the moment, and it will be once this proposal goes
But
through.
if we densified just A, like extended A from the original small piece into the larger piece, or A and B, we could phase the development differently with a covenant saying that the future area for development is to be considered at X build out of the community with the growth management area?
It could be phased in many different ways, like I said.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Council, any more questions? Don't see any hands. There were a number of comments made, staff. I have a bit of a list here that should first reading proceed. And just for the public's information, first reading is an introduction of the bylaw. It's in no way an approval of the bylaw. It's just a formal introduction of the bylaw to the public. Council can receive all sorts of feedback and comment on the bylaw leading up to the public hearing. So this is just the formal introduction of the bylaw. Council has the prerogative to either reject first reading or approve first reading and move it to through the process. So this is just the beginning of the potential process. But I heard quite a few comments that it would be good if we had information on for second reading, so there's more clarity for the public and for council, and perhaps some options. And I'm hoping I encapsulate some of council's comments. If I miss some, please let me know. There was comments about options for funding the parks and trails, whether in full or partial. And I'm wondering if we could just get more clear information about the pros and cons of either doing it through strata, through a local service area tax, through general taxation, and whether or not maybe some of it, pocket parks are done through strata, but the more community parks and trails are done through other mechanisms of funding. So I just think council and the public could have some options there. And tell me if I'm being either not getting this right or being unreasonable. It would be good to have some understanding of how some of these strata parks funding work in other communities. I know there's a couple in Vancouver, but if we could actually have sort of tangible examples that the public and council can say, oh yeah, okay, that works on False Creek, or just so we really understand how these may or may not work, and maybe address some of the concerns about entitlement and that type of thing. It would be good to have a better understanding of the fragmentation, pros and cons of this development in terms of fragmentation of habitat. What exists now, there were some comments about these development pods fragmenting the ecological areas, and so I'd like council and maybe just a clearer understanding, and that could be that the environmental consultant speaks to it more directly, but I think some more sort of framework around that would be helpful. If we could get a bit of a clear comparison of how this greenfield type development CAC program compares to some of the brownfield or other development CACs, so we understand if it is raising the bar because it's a greenfield development or not. It would be, I think, valuable to have that assessment a little bit more. I would like to have some exploration of how we secure these cottages in that built form. I think the intention is to be small and low, so, and that was certainly what was presented in the booklet. So I don't know how that gets covenanted or through the land development agreement, but some clarity about what the intention is there. I think great suggestion on having a third party sign on to the ecological reserve covenant of some sort to ensure that we are actually getting habitat in perpetuity. It would be valuable, I think, to understand the pros and cons of more permeable trails versus paved trails, and where we may choose to see more permeability for ecological reasons and others, and those options. If we could get an understanding if there's a possibility for creating some permanent daycare space within the clubhouse, that I think would be useful. Was there anything I missed, council, in terms of some of the comments that we can, should this proceed through first reading, ensure that we have clear information on second reading? Yep.
On visitor parking, I see very few spaces for visitor parking, and these are very dense neighborhoods with, I haven't seen a lot of parking for visitors.
And so maybe, I don't know if you have any information now, as there's certainly more parking along Tantalus Road, and there's some specific mountain bike and park user parking, but within the neighborhoods, is there the usual amount of street parking? I don't know, Susan, can you do that now?
Through the mayor, just quickly, the applicants have actually provided a number of, there is a lot of new on-street parking being provided on Tantalus and Newport Ridge Drive. That's the main off-street parking. But within the development pods themselves, there are little nodes, actually it doesn't show too well on this drawing, there are little nodes of pull-offs. These roads, the collector, although it's a strata road, we're still calling it a collector. And there are pull-offs located, and I'll have to bring some blow-ups of what these look like. But the applicants have, wherever they've been able to do it without affecting the environmental habitat balance, they have actually provided pull-offs adjacent to these collector roads. And one of the opportunities with the fact that there is no longer a internal road connecting areas B and C through that important habitat, there's an opportunity for parking and a turnaround area at the bottom of parcel B. So those are things that the applicants are looking at. And again, it's this same challenge that we're not actually doing detailed design. We're trying to see if the development is moving forward. And some of these design issues will evolve as the applicants know the project is proceeding. But it is important that we know these issues so we can give direction to the applicants. But there is on-street parking. I don't have numbers, but that is something they've been looking at.
So if we could get some, just some real clarity on the parking capacity.
And it was just a question that wasn't answered before. How many houses and townhouses do we have on the books currently that are in development for waterfront, for our current, on the books, what's been passed through readings?
Yeah, if at second reading, if this proceeds through first reading, if we could have the context of the greater development capacity.
That it makes a difference for me zoning green space to know what our development capacity is right now and our staff capacity is right now, as far as approving more projects.
Yeah, we can bring that information forward.
So I'm voting on first reading without.
This is the introduction of the bylaw, so.
I'm voting on first reading without that information? Yes, I guess so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, if it's moved, yeah. Council, staff, were there any questions or comments that I missed in terms of information that we should ensure is clear for if this moves forward to second reading? Did I cover everything?
I think that generally covers everything.
Okay, I'll just go to council, see if there's any last questions. I'm looking for direction from council in terms of if they'd like to proceed to first reading. Councillor Pryor?
Yeah, I'll move to first reading.
Seconded by Councillor Elliott. Councillor Pryor, do you want to speak to it? And I'm just going to remind everyone this is first reading.
Well, just that, you know, there's some good things that I see with trail connections and amenities that I want this to move to the next phase, so that's clear for everybody. The opportunities there, and I've heard lots from my colleagues here that have some questions that need more information, that if we take it to second reading, we'll hear the answers to all that.
Thanks. Would anyone else like to comment on first reading? Councillor Grace.
Thank you. So I'm going to support this resolution. I think when this first came to council, as was outlined by staff, back in the middle of 2016, we were talking about 500 some odd units and significantly more density. I had some concerns along a number of different fronts, and I heard some concerns also from the community about different aspects of this. But this development, as staff pointed out at the start, has evolved significantly from that point. Considerably less density, setbacks improved, no development in some areas that were very sensitive to development, and I don't mean just for ecological regions, but also the impact on neighbors and so forth. So it is at a point where I think this should proceed now and go to the public. I'm sure between first and second reading, and just so the public knows, one of the reasons we separate those is to allow some tweaking, if you like, or some changes between the two, and you heard the comments the mayor made. It's likely there will be some changes to it, but I think it's at a point now where it should start proceeding through the development process towards the public hearing, and so I'm supporting this application.
Councillor Chappell.
Thank you. I've struggled with this from the beginning. I think most people know that, and I've tried to keep an open mind about connectivity in the trails and public needs for trails versus taking green space out of our RCP, which for me is it's a big deal. So we currently have an OCP. I ran an election campaign on redoing our OCP, and we're currently in the process of redoing our OCP, and we've gone through quite an extensive public engagement on our new OCP. And I know this project came through before our current OCP. So even in the old OCP, CD12, green space development is a big deal. And I just pulled up an Excel sheet. 6,600 houses is what we have on the books currently. And that's, I'm not sure if that includes, that's from before, like from May. I would have been more amenable to supporting density. I think this could have been presented to the developer by staff and council in a much different way. I think we could have asked for ecological development and preservation of trails and connectivity and more green space with less density and less site removal without areas C and D even. I would have been amenable to, and I still am, you know, if it goes through public hearing and it ends up passing, I am still interested in hearing from the public, but the way it stands right now is we're looking at an absolute A or B scenario. All I hear about is capacity from staff to develop. This puts an enormous amount of strain on our municipal infrastructure and staff. This, and with the amount of housing and development that we have on the books right now, I am just concerned for capacity. And I also would have been interested in hearing about different ways to do it, like having a little bit of a cap and recognizing that it's green space and that green space is something that I think is sacred. And I don't dispel the fact that it gives connectivity to trails, but I don't think it's a we're going to shut this off scenario like it was before. I think we could have obtained trail connectivity with less density. So for that reason, I am going to vote against first reading.
Councillor Kent.
I concur with Councillor Chappelle, and I think the question to ask is, does Squamish need this development? As per her numbers, and mine are slightly higher because I'm also including the oceanfront, but even at 6,000 units to be conservative, you know, we're talking about the downtown, the oceanfront properties, the waterfront landing, and I would like to see the process of infill occur, and those developments allow themselves to flesh out, to see what kind of an impact they have on the community before we start sprawling out. And I know that you've coined the term smart growth and said that this falls into those principles, but for me, I think that it contravenes that concept in that we're sprawling out along the highway. I would rather see us fill in the downtown core, fill in the oceanfront, fill in waterfront landing, then start to move away from the downtown core and lead those developments which are currently on the books and are moving along and lead them out. So for me, I can't vote.
Councillor Buckman.
Yeah, I'm with Councillor Kent and Councillor Chappelle on this. You know, maybe if it was 20 years from now and we exhausted our supply of other developable land, we might be having a different conversation. But, you know, it's really striking the number of watercourses that run through this particular property. And I think that when it was originally conceived as a golf course, I think that was you know, the fact that it was done in that way was a big reason why the development did go forward, was because most of it was going to be green space, and now we're eroding that because a developer came in and engaged in a speculative venture. And you know, at the end of the day, do we support what our OCP says it envisions for the community? I mean, I think this is a slippery slope. You know, that being said, if it still goes forward after first reading, I really do hope to see that some improvements, but I won't be voting in favor of first reading.
I will be supporting first reading. I think this project has continued to evolve since it was first presented, and I think we get another opportunity here to hear again from the public and to incorporate some of the council's comments, and I'd like to see what comes back at second reading.
Thanks. I'll be supporting first reading. This has gone through an evolution, and I think it's at the point where This should go formally to the public for comment, and that's what first reading is all about. All of council legislatively has to keep an open mind. We like to say not an empty mind prior to public hearing. But the first reading kicks off that process. I think there are a lot of upsides to this project potentially, and obviously they come with some compromises, and that's sort of the fundamental decision that's in front of council. And we need the public's feedback to understand if we are going in the right direction. So I really encourage everyone to articulate their point of view on this project if it passes first reading.
Yep, go ahead. Thanks. The one thing I think about public feedback is with our OCP. We've done a huge amount of engagement. I've never seen an OCP in any other community that takes green space out of their OCP. So I'm interested in, if it's, it seems like it is going to move forward, I'm interested in hearing about other communities that remove green space from their OCP and at what stage of development they do move towards taking green space out of their OCP. And that is another thing. As I tried, you know, I attended quite a few of the public meetings with Polygon, and I really do appreciate the fact that they've taken into account so many of our public's concerns in order to redevelop green space. But in the end, my public's OCP and the comments that are made in that OCP are something that is incredibly sacred to me. And it doesn't mean that it's not just a guideline and I'm willing to rezone if it's needed, but I'm more apt to rezone something from low density to high density than removing of sensitive habitat and species at risk land that allows corridors of animals to travel from one green space to another out of our OCP.
Thank you. I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Chappelle, Councillor Black-and-Wolf, Councillor Kent, opposed, motion carries. We're going to take a 5-minute recess and we will, oh yeah, we have to do the zoning one. Yeah, sorry. Would someone like to move the zoning? Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Pryor. I think we've all spoken to it. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Chappelle, Kent, and Black-and-Wolf opposed, motion carries. We'll take a 5-minute recess. you, everybody. We're going to try to reconvene now.
Is this going to require another cup of coffee?
Oh, yeah. Kelsey and Gary, are we back on? Okay. I'll reconvene this meeting, and I do want to thank everyone that is here for the next item for persevering and remaining in the public. We are now on development permit number 461-310 Buckley Avenue, the Jumar proposal development permit application. Mr. Valiniskis.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Jonas Valiniskis, Director of Community Planning, presenting this project on behalf of Kerry Hamilton, who was the planner on the project but is not with us today. And I will be presenting it to you, the development permit 461, which is located at 38310 Buckley Avenue, also known as Jumar. So there have been in total 3 development applications in recent years. The first being a temporary use permit in 2014 to allow for a Biennale art exhibit on the property. In 2015, 2 applications were received. One was to rezone the eastern portion of the property to C4 downtown commercial zone. And the second one, so this will be this part here. And the second one was to install industrial use, an oil lube station on this half of the property. And finally, the District of Squamish led a rezoning process for the whole property to rezone it to C4 around the same time as we received those 2 development applications for industrial development permit and the C4, because the industrial zoning on site was not in line with the draft downtown neighborhood plan and the vision for the downtown gateway. So the district rezoned the site to C4 in order to remove any future potential for industrial use, because the development permit application, particularly that we received, was going to be processed under existing zoning. Now, the applicant of that application withdrew the DP application once the district rezoned the whole site to C4. So that's just some history on the site. The designation is downtown commercial. The zoning is downtown commercial. The subject lands are zoned C4. There are a variety of zones and uses that surround the parcel. To the east is an existing downtown commercial C4 development. To the south is an industrial I-6 rail transportation zone. To the east corner, the start of a multiple unit residential 1 zone. And to the north, an assembly district zone P2, which is home to the Ecole Squamish Elementary. The property is uniquely divided by a road easement in favor of the School District 48 to allow vehicle access to Ecole Squamish Elementary. The development for form and character is subject to Development Permit Area 5 and is designated commercial within the downtown neighborhood plan. The site is designated commercial gateway in the new draft official community plan. So the site actually falls into 2 development permit areas. One is DPA 5, and the second one is Development Permit Area 11, which is our riparian development permit area because of some ditches that are on the site. The DP application seeks to permit the construction of a 5 to 6 story mixed-use residential commercial development consisting of 101 residential units and 1,655 square meters of commercial space on the ground floor, which is proposed to include 537 square meters of childcare space, in total approximately 18,000 square feet of employment space. The proposal includes 12 3-bedroom townhouses along the west side, closest to the RM1 multi-unit residential zone lots. So the townhouses are located in this part of the building. The townhouses offer rooftop patios and are 3-story high above 1-story commercial and 1-story of parkade for a total of 5-story building. The gateway east side of the development offers 4 stories with a range of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom condominiums Access to all residential units are by a central courtyard that offers landscaping, seating areas, and life-size chess set. So the condominiums are located on this side with a courtyard in the middle, and they're located above commercial space and then a parkade. The development offers active transportation connections both through and around the development, as signed here in blue. The development will share access onto Buckley Avenue with the current entranceway to the elementary school, indicated on the plan here in red. Although this design is unique and the school is already experiencing traffic problems, given the circumstances around the site and the nature of access into the school, a traffic study has been conducted to make sure that this development will not increase traffic concerns during peak school drop-off and pickup times. Extensive streetscape changes are also proposed with this development, including the addition of a right turn lane. There it is in green. It's a little bit off the site. So the right turn lane would be right here. At the Cleveland and Buckley intersection, so that's where the right turn lane is. And the addition of a bi-directional separated bike lane in purple. That will wrap the south contour of the parcel. There it is. So there's the bike lane. There's the right turn lane. And there's the entrance into the schoolway. So that's the easement side. And the blue arrows show the connection, the pedestrian connectivity through the site. Two main plazas provide distinct entranceways for both residential access and public access through the site. Wood grain soffits and soft linear lighting wrap the plaza entranceways as well as the ceilings above all the walkways. Fun, colorful bollards line a 3-meter wide pathway from Buckley to the school district property to promote safe and pedestrian-friendly access to the adjacent elementary school. This attention to detail exceeds Development Permit Area 5 guidelines as well as our zoning bylaw requirements. The main residential building materials include Nichila and Hardy cementitious panels with wood grain soffits, accents along the varied window boxes and underneath a continuous roof line. Aluminum powder-coated metal screens are proposed along the second story to conceal an open residential parking garage. A playful rhythm is created through the play of colors, varying widths, heights of the spacing between the panels, varying offset from the building face, as well as the size of the perforations of the actual materials. Added playfulness with more color panel is proposed on the north side of the development facing the school. Landscaping in residential planters above have proposed plant species that can grow over top of these screens. So the screening that's being pointed to, I'm just going to try and get my mouse across there. There we go. So there's the screening above the commercial space. And there's the entrance into the school site. The storefronts are a mix of glass, window, spandrel, dark gray glass accents. The development will offer a continuous 1.83 meter wide canopy above all of the commercial units, A and B commercial frontages. Lastly, this development proposes special artistic features at both the school entranceway of Buckley Avenue and the gateway entrance to the site. So the advisory design panel has reviewed this proposal. The panel generally supported the project as presented and had made a number of recommendations for staff to work with the applicant. Minutes of the ADP are attached to the report. In response to these recommendations, the applicant modified a number of factors in the plan to address the items summarized in the staff report. In the opinion of staff, the applicant has sufficiently addressed the ADP's comments and recommendations within the context of the development permit area guidelines. So again, there are no variance requests in this application, so it is tied to our development permit area guidelines and the zoning bylaw requirements. In terms of public engagement, the project was posted on the Development Showcase. Public information meeting was hosted on June 22nd, 2017. Close to 50 public information meeting comments, requests for information on Showcase and or emailed public comments have been received to date, and we have been receiving some today. A petition against the development was launched in July of 2017, and staff did take further steps to consult with 2 concerned citizens leading the petition, as well as attend a School District 48 board meeting to answer any questions and receive comments and concerns from the school district trustees and councilors. In terms of public comments, there are 8 main themes that emerged that we try to summarize for council. One was density, just the wrong location for Squamish, and as pointed out in the report, although this kind of density next to a school is new to Squamish, higher density housing next to elementary schools are relatively common in areas undergoing densification, and especially infill, given that schools provide essential services to residents and are generally located in central community places. So density of housing and schools often go hand in hand, and it really is a good planning practice. Traffic intersection congestion. So this development will provide enhanced safe routes to school options around and through this development. School drop-off and pickup times should not be affected by the development, as commuter traffic will be at different times. The development also proposes some enhancements to the easement drive aisles, which will make for an easier left turn out of the development, which is currently causing congestion. So this development should improve the traffic flow through the site. Student safety and walkability was another concern. This development is including several streetscape and offsite enhancements that will increase the safety and walkability to the school. Insufficient parking was another concern. Again, this development complies and exceeds the district's parking requirements with an addition of 10 residential stalls and 3 commercial stalls above what is required. Height, design, and view impacts and shadows was another concern. A shadow study was conducted and shows existing park space shadowed by the building during the winter solstice particularly. However, it is noted that the winter solstice is a challenging time in downtown Squamish in general, given the presence of the chief, which naturally blocks sunlight. The shade analysis does show that at other times the development isn't impacted as much. Affordability for families. Staff have worked with the applicant to increase the amount of 2 and 3 bedroom units proposed in this development to offer more realistic units for families. So the percentage of 1 bedrooms has decreased since the application was submitted. There were concerns about school capacity, and districts have worked closely with the School District 48 staff throughout this review. The school district is aware of these increased capacity concerns, but these are beyond this application. Construction concerns, that was one of the concerns we heard as well, and construction plans are required at the time of building permit. Maintaining safe access to existing sidewalks, bike lanes, and vehicle drive aisles are required as part of the building code and the building bylaw, and our building officials have significant authority in regulating safety on the site as per the building code, and we will be exercising that to the fullest degree when the building permit does come in. The district might have to make some adjustments in our process to make sure that if this development continues forward, that it can happen as much as possible during the summer break. So we will be sensitive to the fact that there's a school operating next door. In terms of development permit area guidelines and conformance to them, is a high quality building materials surrounding all elevations, special colorful treatment along the north facade where the school is, wood grain soffit throughout the building design, even within the parking garage, and artistic features at key entranceways. So all of these things go beyond what our development permit area guidelines require. And I'm going to turn it over to Caroline Ashikian on the PA 11 guidelines.
Thank you. Caroline Ashikian, Environmental Coordinator with the district and professional biologist. So this development proposal does meet the guidelines, the riparian protection guidelines in our development permit area 11 in our OCP. There are 2 man-made ditches on the site. That's the extent of the environmental resources on the site. So there's a man-made ditch on the eastern and the western portion of the subject property. And both ditches are non-fish bearing, however, they are connected to fish habitat. Therefore, there is a requirement that a 2-meter buffer be maintained adjacent to both of the ditches. So the ditch on the east side of the site will be maintained, and the 2-meter buffer will be revegetated and restored. So there will be enhancement in that area, and any existing trail connectivity in that area, including a bridge crossing, will remain. And the ditch on the west side of the site will be infilled, resulting in a loss of just over 630 square meters of habitat. And of this, 537 square meters will be offset or compensated through the construction of rain gardens on the site, and an additional 97 excuse me, square meters will be compensated for off-site.
In terms of council priority areas, the proposal shows improved side drainage and stormwater infiltration capacity through ditch restoration and rain garden construction. It offers 17% of the gross floor area as employment space, which is coming fairly close to where the district is potentially heading to with the 20% requirement in the C4 zone, and meets the maximized built environment and connect community priorities criteria of council by having active transportation improvements around the site. So the staff recommendation is to authorize development permit number 461, subject to the landscaping bond, registration of flood covenant on title, as well as the riparian bonding. Thank you.
I have Councillor Reese and Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. One of the concerns is traffic congestion, and I understand from the correspondence we've had on this particular site over the last couple of years now, actually, not this developer, but other developments and so forth. One of the problems is the school drop-off and pick-up traffic in and out, and the congestion that sometimes creates. And I'm told that that right-of-way that's in the center of the site is being configured as 3 lanes instead of 2 lanes, 1 in to the school and 2 out, 1 for left-hand turns and 1 for right-hand turns. Are you able to confirm that? I was looking through the report to see that, but I didn't actually see it, and I couldn't tell from the diagrams whether that's the case. But, oh, there it is, way at the end there. Sorry.
Yes, I'll defer the question to Laura Princic, our municipal engineer, but that is showing 3 lanes there.
Yes, so that's exactly the point. Right now, one of the major frustrations is that for all the people who are trying to turn right out of the site, they're stuck behind a lot of people trying to turn left. So this it will facilitate, make that easier.
Okay. Good, thank you. No, I couldn't see that in the drawing from the report. Thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
The active transportation improvements, there's a bi-directional bike lane now to on the south side of the property. But what does it connect to? So like, is it connecting to the sidewalk that goes past McDonald's, and then is it connecting to the road bike lane on Buckley?
Through you, Mayor. So this has been, a lot of thought was put into how this would work. And so there's a few different things. One of them is that ultimately it will be a continuation of the future 3rd Avenue protected bike lane that crosses over the train tracks at that pedestrian crossing. So it's connecting this site to downtown. It's also connecting the Hunter, Nestor's, that shopping plaza to downtown, because right now there really isn't a very good connection. As you know, Loggers Lane, Cleveland, all of these are not particularly welcoming places to cycle or to walk, for that matter. And then of course it also ties into the Discovery Trail, although that's a little bit informal at the moment. And then we are also maintaining or actually not maintaining, but well, yes, sorry, the southbound on Buckley, southeastbound, a bike lane on the south side. So if somebody's traveling down the government road corridor in its existing form, they'll still be able to get themselves to that Cleveland intersection going in that south direction. So we try to find the best of both to accommodate like the all ages and abilities users that will get on that bi-directional bike path, as well as the strong and confident riders that'll just want to whip down Buckley to get to their destination.
And my second question, just around active transportation, is as people come across from, there's lots of people that walk to the school, and as they come across the tracks and that signaled crossing on the west side of the property, is there still a path that will allow kids to go behind this development to get to school, or do they all have to come in through the front?
Yes, so can you show the other half of this? Yeah, so, except it's not on this one. There is currently, where the crossing goes, the pedestrian crossing, there's proposed a path there, and then at the moment there's a gravel path that actually the school board built in the last year and a bit, I think. And I was told that that was going to be paved. That was one of the off-site improvements that the developer was going to offer, and so that's yeah.
So that option remains.
Yes, and then that connects directly to the sidewalk area in front of the school. So.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Kent and Councillor Chappelle.
Thank you. A very real and significant concern, I think, is the initial building on the site while school is in progress. And I know you spoke to the possibility of being able to do some of this, obviously, not all, but some of it during the summer months. I would assume that would be probably the site prep excavation and some foundational work. Or how are we able to ensure that or mandate that? Because it's actually, I can, as a parent myself, I can imagine, a lot of parents would be quite fearful of having kids around heavy equipment and a very active site with a lot going on.
For you, Mayor, so we will try and, when we receive the building permit application, we will try and make sure that we're not the reason why it can't happen in the summer. We can't mandate it in any way. The site will have to get managed. There will have to be traffic managers on site, especially in the easement area, to direct traffic through when there's works occurring. But we will try and facilitate that construction can happen in the summer. So we might have to expedite the proposal when the building permit, if it comes in the spring, let's say, to make sure that it's not gonna, the site works won't start in the fall. So we have limited control over it, but we will do what's within the district's powers to make sure that it can happen in the summertime. This development will probably take a year, if not more, to build. So obviously it will have to be done outside of the summer months. But again, the safety of the site will have to be managed in accordance with the building code, and we have significant powers to shut things down or ask for changes as this building goes through the building permitting process.
And if I may, so if we could ask for changes, would we be able to designate or ask for later starts in the morning, for instance, so that the kids could get into the school before the activity began on the site, and then have them either lull it or finish before the activity began for the kids to get out of school?
Yeah, that's correct. The building officials have significant authority when it comes to site safety.
Thank you.
Councillor Chappelle, then Councillor Clark.
Thank you. Cleveland Avenue and connectivity to high school. So people coming from down.
Can you outline those two things a little further?
The active transportation on Cleveland Avenue and how people can get from the corridor trail here. Is there any connections being fixed in that? Or is it still going to remain the sidewalk?
Through here, so we have, basically, if you wanted to get all the way to the high school, as far as we're concerned here, you would need to cross at the pedestrian crossing to the west side of the road where there's the existing sidewalk on Buckley. Having said that, we have been in discussions unrelated to this project to getting a pathway perhaps put on that east side of the ditch connecting to the high school, and we'll continue to have those discussions with the school board, because we recognize that would be a really important connection to make between the two schools.
Providing
for all non-motorized uses, I guess you could say.
And then Cleveland Avenue connectivity from the corridor trail down, is there going to be a lane for a bike lane off the sidewalk now, or is it still going to remain on the sidewalk?
On Cleveland itself?
Yeah.
So that the multi-use path will start like just at the, you know, the north corner of the site there, and that's as far as it extends for now. So it doesn't, we're not putting a bike lane on Cleveland, we're not there yet, so.
Okay, so is the sidewalk widening there, or is it like, how will, I'm just wondering about cyclists coming down, because that's generally the natural path down, even though we're connecting the underway and how people should go, but people still use that. So are cyclists still on the sidewalk in that area?
So the stretch that's from, you're talking about like the highway intersection at Cleveland, across the McDonald's frontage would still be on the sidewalk. And then, but then it picks up to a multi-use trail.
So it is a multi-use trail in front of there. There is separation between cyclists and pedestrians.
And then there's also a sidewalk. So this actually,
Okay,
yes,
perfect.
this
Yeah, that's
wraparound
what
frontage has both a multi-use path and a sidewalk. So the intention is that the multi-use path will be primarily for cyclists, bi-directional, and then the sidewalk will be for the pedestrians.
Thank you.
Councillor Cryer?
Yeah, thanks. Just to Pete's point on the safety of the site, it'll have a 6-foot construction fence all the way around it. You know, just to comment on that. But my question is on the daycare. I mean, that's a pretty big space. I'm just curious as to, is there a student per square foot in daycare?
There are provincial licensing requirements.
Yeah.
I can't speak to those off the top of my head, but yes, there are ratios for space. You need so much outdoor space.
But so in
student.
square feet, how many was that? Was that 1,500 square feet?
It was 560 square meters, so that would be around 6,000 square feet.
6,000 square feet. That's like 5 times this room.
3 times. 4.
Wow.
Yeah. Councillor Blackman-Wolf.
Just wondering, how essential is the additional right-hand turn lane coming off of Cleveland? Is it essential to make that work, or is it more of an optional thing? Because obviously there is a trade-off. You improve traffic flow, but then you also make the road width wider, so there's more distance for pedestrians to cross. So just wondering if there was other options looked at, like for example, rejigging the signalization and maybe having a different coordination that way to improve that, or is that something that the engineers said that we have to have?
But through you, Mayor, so I have such a happy answer. We are not increasing the road width. We are actually, it's hard to see from this particular shot, but what we're actually proposing to do is move all the traffic lanes into that really large painted median right now that's there, and then we checked the truck movements to make sure that wasn't going to cause a problem with the trucks that are trying to turn onto Hunter and onto Loggers. So at least the crossing distance isn't increasing. We're not really doing any other improvements to it, except that we will, the right-hand turn lane. So the other nice thing about this style of right-hand turn lane is that the cars will, unless it's a green light, they'll be basically forced to stop or slow down significantly because they have to make a right angle turn. I didn't want to do a swoopy swoop because then people just, they don't slow down enough, and that's when actually pedestrian safety is
I like it when engineers use swoopy swoop.
I know.
Technical term.
But we all know what you meant.
Yes.
And to that end too, I mean, could you envision also maybe even a little enhancement at the corner, like maybe even like a bollard or something else that like sort of reinforces that corner to make sure that, because my concern always would be that now that you're going to have a dedicated right-hand turn lane, that people will be turning on red all of the time, and they may not be always watching for, people coming across. And so just to put it out there that if there's anything else to really simplify that corner, and because it is really a transition zone, people are just coming off the highway and they're starting to think about pedestrians. So if we as a district could do anything to enhance that intersection, I think that would be a good investment, sort of separate from this application, but just wanted to highlight that. That's good though. I'm glad that the width has stayed the same.
So just to build on that a little bit, so currently there's no dedicated right-hand turn lane. So we're adding another lane, we're not adding width, correct? And do we see that as a problem today, the backlog that not having that right-hand turn lane makes? Does it, I'm trying to see the added value of adding a whole other lane, and maybe we should add more bike lane instead.
So the traffic study did actually show that there were, and you know what, I don't have the number off the top of my head, I'm not going to dig for it, but there was a significant number of right-hand turning movements per hour that warrants a right turn lane in terms of by traffic warrants. And then the second part, of course, is the train. So every time there's a train, which seems to want to come by at 9 a.m. every morning, and then there's a lot of anecdotal, like this is a key complaint that I know I hear from parents that are coming down the highway from, either from the Valley Cliff Hospital Hill area or from further the north part of town. So I think it's going to help capacity of Cleveland and help keep traffic moving the way we want it to while not compromising pedestrian safety. So it's a pretty good solution, I think.
We've talked a little bit about safety during the construction phase, and I think that's obviously a big concern, and we need to do what we can. Another concern, and I don't know how we deal with it, but the noise that's created during the day adjacent to a school through construction, whether it's drilling or pounding or whatever, is there any way to mitigate the noise impact during the school day?
Not really. I mean, it is a byproduct of growth, and I'm just thinking of other examples. The development by Polygon by the Montessori School. We haven't heard, I don't think, any complaints about the fact that that's going up next door. I mean,
Haven't heard them.
Schools tend to be pretty loud areas, especially at break time, but yes, there will be construction noise, and really other than working outside of the school months, there's not a whole lot that we could do to manage the noise.
No?
No, we can look at it, but again, that's something that we'll have to deal with at building permit stage. At this point, I don't think there's much that we can do with respect to noise. We can do a lot with respect to safety.
Do you know if the site will have to be piled?
No, I don't.
Just thinking, but I'm not a contractor, but that's one of the worst things. Having had an office downtown next to the development of the shopping center next to us, that was the thing that was most aggravating, was the piling. And that might be a summer activity.
Yes.
We might consider something like that, or holiday time, Christmas holidays or something.
Yes.
But my old office was in the Diamond Head Medical Center, on the second floor there. And when they were putting the drugstore in next to it and the shopping center and so forth, it was the piling that was the most irritating to the people that were actually living next to that construction. They're working next to that construction.
And that's certainly what I was thinking in terms of the aggravating noise. I mean, you're going to get drills and cutting machines and stuff, but it's the pile driving that seems to permeate. And I don't know how we stagger that appropriately, but. Councillor, are there any more questions? This is a development permit, so we do have decision-making discretion under our guidelines. Any DP11 questions at this point? I don't see any. Councillor Pryor?
Well, my understanding is it exceeded all the DP11 guidelines, did
It met all the DP11 guidelines.
it say exceeded?
It exceeded the DP.
Exceeded form and character, DPA 5.
5. No more questions, council? Yep.
In your meeting with the school district, are they planning any changes as a result of this development?
Yes, they are looking for solutions as the school expands to establish alternative access, but that's kind of a long-term solution. It's way beyond the timelines of this development, but they are looking at other options, providing another point of access from Buckley Avenue.
Any questions? Seeing no more questions, council can consider DP, I'll just try to read it out here. Council consider the authorization of DP number 461 for property legally described as Lot 5 Plan LMP 36291, District Lot 4261, located at 38310 Buckley Avenue in Squamish. Subject to the provisions of bonding for phasing of landscaping work in the form of cash, certified check, or irrevocable letter of credit to the amount of $367,731.35. Registration of a flood covenant on title and the provision of bonding for riparian protection, restoration, enhancement, offsetting in the form of cash, certified check, or an irrevocable letter of credit in the amount of $49,203. Is there anyone who would like to move that? Moved by Councillor Pryor, seconded by Councillor Race. Councillor Pryor, do you want to speak to the DP?
You know, and it's funny, I've been in Squamish a long time, and I can remember when we started using the word gateway and looking at a stellar building as a gateway. And we got McDonald's. That was our gateway. And then the next one was A&W. And so I'm happy to see a gateway structure coming. I'm sorry that if it offends some people that think it's too close to a school and that, but I think everyone will get used to it. And I'm happy to say that when you drive by now, you will see a gateway structure. I'm happy to support it.
Councillor Race?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to support this. I actually find it quite an imaginative and attractive solution, design solution to that area. And I agree with Councillor Pryor. It is, I think, it is a gateway area certainly, and it would form an attractive entrance to our community. So I think this is some quite interesting design features to it in my mind, not as an expert designer, but just as a layperson. And so I think it will, I appreciate it's next to a school. I think that can be managed. I think that's something that the staff have said is going to become more and more common, not just in Squamish, but in other municipalities as densification occurs around school sites. But I don't think that's a problem. I think the traffic flow, in some ways, I think will even improve. I think that 3-lane right-of-way will actually speed things up a little bit until the school district does take steps to expand the school and provide an alternate access. So happy to support this.
Councillor Kent?
Yeah, I'm going to support this, and I know there are some folks out there who had made comments saying that they would like to have seen either the district or the school district purchase this property and turn it into a park, and unfortunately, neither of us have the appetite or the wherewithal to do so. I think, as Doug has put it, and Ted as well, we need a gateway piece. I know it's in a close proximity to schools, and I know that there are many other instances in communities all around the world, for that matter, where developments such as this coexist with schools. My gravest concern, I think, is during the construction phase, and I hope we can manage that. But I do think this is a great use of that space, far better than what its initial application was of an oil and lube facility. Especially with daycare, with mixed use, with retail, and allowing that to be, as I had put it in the last item that we had on the agenda, we want infill, we want densification in the downtown core, and this allows people to be able to walk to work, walk to shopping, walk to schools, to daycare, all of that. And it's definitely in keeping with smart growth, and it's also in keeping with our strategic plan, so I would support it.
Councillor Chappelle?
Thank you. I really struggled with this when it was a oil lube site as well, when it was industrial land, but I concur with a lot of Councillor Kent's point of view here. I think this is a density for the downtown. The fact that there's commercial businesses on the ground floor is fantastic. The fact that 6,000 of it is daycare, a dedicated daycare, is fantastic. And as far as, you know, my kids both drive through this area daily as far as on using active transportation. So I was really concerned with the connectivity of the site and with it being safe, because my little girl is still going to continue to go across that, and irregardless of how we plan it, I want to make sure that, you know, because the kids aren't going to stick to where we expect them to go, but I look to the school board to resolve a lot of those issues. Those aren't this development's issue. This development has done a great job of creating active ways that my little girl can walk from downtown to this public school and get to the high school where her bus goes. So I am going to support this development, and I look forward to the commercial and walkability being in downtown. I think staff has done an excellent job with transportation. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll make a few comments. This is a DP, so we do have a certain parameter with which to make decisions. From the sort of form and character point of view, I think it's actually a pretty interesting and pleasing, kind of a cool building. I think it will be a statement piece as you enter the community, so I think from that point of view it's a positive addition. It's hard. I certainly come from, you know, the schools I went to as a kid had high-rises next door to it. So for me, the fact that there's a higher density building adjacent to a school isn't necessarily problematic aspect. I think it's really how it interfaces appropriately with the school that's important. I think the developers, certainly in the year that this has been through DP, has evolved tremendously in terms of its interface with the school, its permeability, its creativity in terms of the vernacular. And I think it will ultimately improve both pedestrian, cycling, and car traffic issues that currently exist. And there are other things that we need to do to continue to improve this area. This is not the solution to it all, but it's certainly a good start. I am concerned about the construction phase, and you know, I've talked to the developer, and I believe they're going to be good corporate citizens and be sensitive to the challenges adjacent. There are going to be issues that arise, undoubtedly, but my hope is that we can mitigate those things as much as possible. I think particularly the pile driving, if we can be, I know that's really tough, but if we can be strategic about ensuring that the majority of that noise isn't between 9 o'clock in the morning and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, between September and December and January and June, then that'll make everyone a little bit happier. So generally there isn't a reason to not approve the DP. It meets the guidelines, and with that in mind, I will be supporting the development permit. Okay, I don't see any more hands, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. We have one more quick item. It's the ratification of the motion that was done earlier today. I'm not going to reread it, but it is with regard to the MOU between the district, the Chamber of Commerce and Tourism of Squamish for the Rural Dividend Fund 2 projects that we acquired funding for. Moved by Councillor Race, seconded by Councillor Kent. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion carries, and I'll entertain a motion to terminate. Moved by Councillor Race, seconded by Councillor Blackman. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. I want to thank everyone for coming. Appreciate staff's efforts in getting this all set up. Thanks.
Thank you.